Episode 586, Using Miss Clark's Name. Before entering, Mr. Marshall stopped and turned to look at Bessy. He slightly lowered his head, his whole momentum rather strong.
Miss Clark, please refrain from talking at will later. We'll move according to the situation.
Bessy took off her hat and only nodded. She never cared about the business.
Sir, Patrick said that the person inside is a little difficult to handle, and Mr. Clark isn't here this time.
Julius's face was a little dark beside him. She was afraid it would be too difficult to handle. As soon as they entered, they saw people in black standing on both sides. These people looked imposing and had fierce eyes and bearish backs. They were obviously difficult to provoke. Naturally, the Marshall family also had guards trained in private. Whether it was the imposing aura or other aspects, they weren't as good as these men in front of them. Hence, the Marshall family and his party became even more vigilant. Julius felt even more pressurized by these practitioners. Except for Julius and Mr. Marshall, the others were stopped by the men in black. On the contrary, Bessy and Marvin looked the same as before and had no change in their expressions. Mr. Marshall took another glance at Bessy and a trace of surprise flashed across his eyes. They entered the hall to see a foreigner sitting at the coffee table. His eyes were deep set.
Hello, I'm Colton Marshall, the person sent to negotiate with you on the Marshall family's behalf.
Mr. Marshall first introduced himself to the foreigner. While he was speaking, Bessy had already found a seat and sat down. Having kept an eye on her, Julius's expression changed. He wanted to remind her when he saw that Kenneth didn't say anything, so he heaved a sigh of relief instead. Kenneth put down the teacup and glanced away. He didn't see Michael, but saw Bessy following Mr. Marshall. However, Bessy obviously wasn't there to talk. She was just sitting in the corner of the sofa, playing with her cell phone, her drooping face a little impatient. He paused and put down his teacup.
Yes, I'm Kenneth.
Kenneth moved his gaze away from Bessy and spoke somewhat concisely to Mr. Marshall. Those who had been dealing with Kenneth had always been at Michael and Giant Crocodile's level. Mr. Marshall was several levels below them. However, he was still a rather big figure. Although he didn't know who Kenneth was, he could guess that he probably wasn't a regular person. Mr. Marshall talked to Kenneth about the handover without changing his expression. Without Michael present, Kenneth naturally tried to gain the upper hand in the contract. Staring at the weapon pinned to Kenneth's waist, Julius's heart became even more vigilant. The atmosphere in the entire room seemed to freeze, and the flames of war were almost on the verge of breaking out. Marvin, who had been watching Bessy and Kenneth closely, finally heaved a sigh of relief now that they didn't show any signs of anger towards each other. He looked around and saw a tea set on the table, as well as a pot of water. He walked over. The room was filled with the silent flames of war, and Mr. Marshall was under tremendous pressure at the moment. Only Marvin dared to move forward. Beside him, Julius held his arm and lowered his voice.
Mr. Clark, what are you doing? Making tea.
Marvin also whispered back.
Mr. Ken's tea isn't good.
The corners of Julius's mouth twitched, and his nerves were strained tightly. Marvin was actually thinking of this trivial thing?
Mr. Clark, it's not time to make tea.
Julius looked at the terrifying customized TC-7152 gun at Kenneth's waist, especially because Patrick had once told him of it.
It's okay.
When Marvin saw that Kenneth hadn't started fighting with Bessy, he relaxed. After all, they had even eaten James's meal together at the Miller family's house. He raised his arm slightly and shook Julius's hand away. Marvin's sneakers made squeaking sounds as he walked on the marble floor tiles. Although he didn't walk forcefully, the sound was still somewhat obvious because of the originally quiet hall. Squeak! Squeak! Julius stared at him and took a slight breath. He expected Kenneth or Kenneth's men to throw Marvin out. After all, these people didn't look very nice. However, He was surprised to see that their expressions didn't change the slightest bit. After making tea, Marvin held the purple teapot, tilted his head and asked Kenneth,
Mr. Ken, how much is your teapot?
Kenneth was in the midst of negotiating fiercely with Mr. Marshall. Upon suddenly hearing Marvin's serious question, he turned his head and was a little stunned for a moment.
I don't know. This tea set isn't good. Although it looks like the Miller family's tea set, it's still a little different.
Marvin brought the tea over and poured a cup for Bessy. He looked at Kenneth.
Mr. Ken, do you want a cup?
Kenneth handed him his teacup. He took a sip and nodded.
That's right. The tea set is indeed a lot different from Mr. Miller's. Next time I go to Evanston, I'll have to ask him to buy a set for me.
He turned to look at Bessy.
Why are you in Devil City?
I have things to do. Bessy was playing a game at the moment. She put her phone away, took the teacup from Marvin, and then looked at Kenneth with her legs propped up. Have you finished negotiating?
Almost.
Kenneth spoke in rough English. Although he had a bit of a grudge against Bessy, he wasn't a child and could look at the overall situation. During the wedding that time, he had also seen that Bessy and Michael's friends shared half of the seats each. Although Kenneth was vicious, he was no fool. Furthermore, Bessy was friends with Matthew. Marvin's worry was completely unnecessary. This was also the reason why Michael was relieved to let Bessy come here. Bessy checked the time on her phone impatiently and directly said, It's been 10 minutes. How long more? 10 minutes was actually not that long. The normal negotiation time was 1 or 2 hours. They had barely just started.
Soon. Your family's requirements for the contract are too demanding. I don't have to cooperate.
Kenneth handed the document to her.
Take a look.
Bessy was impatient with business matters. However, since Kenneth had given it to her, she endured it and took a look. She flipped through the pages in less than a minute, then casually threw a new contract on the table. Raising her chin, she looked at him and said, Sign it.
60%.
Kenneth shook his head. Even if Michael was here today, he wouldn't let go of 60%. Bessy pointed at the table. I've read it. 50% won't do you any bad. You're just worried about checking the goods. I'll help you get a pass from Matthew. Kenneth had naturally heard about Matthew and Bessy. Upon hearing this, he was indeed moved. He took a cigarette out of his pocket and pinched the lighter with his fingers.
Are you sure?
Of course, as long as it's not too illegal. Bessy had read the contract and knew that it was also beneficial for Matthew. Kenneth would owe her a favor, and Matthew would also break into Japan. Kenneth stared at her for a long time. He knew Bessy wouldn't joke about this matter. Let me contact him for you first. Bessy took out her phone and dialed a number. She hadn't saved Matthew's number, and it was just a string of numbers. Standing behind her, Julius stiffly looked at the Austrian number. 10 minutes later, Kenneth signed the contract with a black pen. He pushed the document to Mr. Marshall. Mr. Marshall was frozen in place. Kenneth wrinkled his brows and bit the unlit cigarette. He ground his teeth and said rather fiercely, You're not signing? Mr. Marshall was speechless. He just didn't expect it to go so smoothly. However, his heart was firm. After calming down, he signed the contract. It took only half an hour for Bessy to come out with this contract. They had gone in at 9 p.m., and it was only 9:30 p.m. when they came out. Waving to Mr. Marshall and buckling the black hat on her head, Bessy said, Mr. Marshall, you can handle the rest. I'll take my leave. Mr. Marshall and his party sent her off in a daze. Marvin slowly drove away. Standing at the door, the other Marshall family members asked anxiously,
Why did you come out in just half an hour? Sir, did the negotiation fall through?
Mr. Marshall stared at the black car without speaking. Seeing that he was silent, the others exchanged glances and turned to Julius, asking anxiously,
Julius, what happened?
Julius retracted his gaze and turned to them.
We successfully signed the contract. Not only that, but we didn't need to use the 55% contract that Mr. Clark prepared. We signed with 60%.
60% was just their first price. Negotiations in business naturally had backup plans. The 60% contract had just been a form of negotiation with Kenneth, like how he demanded 50%. Michael's second contract had been 55%. Miss Clark's name was more beneficial than Mr. Clark's. By a lot more? Episode 587. An Invitation to Lunch. At the same time, at the cemetery, Edward and the others arrived at 10 o'clock. Alec and the other principal members of the West family were present, except Portia.
Portia went to discuss an important matter today.
Alan explained to Edward.
She won't be able to make it back in time.
Portia had always been busy, so Edward wasn't surprised. He nodded.
It's fine.
Turning, he was ready to go when he saw Pete standing on the side of the road, standing tall and looking in the direction of the intersection on the left.
Pete?
Edward paused for a moment and asked gently,
Why aren't you going up?
He thought Pete was timid and didn't dare to go up.
I'm waiting for my mom.
At the mention of Andrea, Pete's expression improved a lot. He looked down at the time on his phone.
She'll be here soon. I'll wait 2 more minutes. Your mom?
Benson was shocked.
How is your mom coming?
The other West family members all felt strange as well. With the summit nearing, flight restrictions were strict. Last night, they had heard Pete's call with his mom and knew that she had been in Evanston at the time. After Pete left, Edward was also focused on Andrea's affairs. In the past 2 days, the West family became increasingly afraid of looking down on Pete, since they all remembered Andrea's affairs. Why was she arriving so soon?
A ticket just happened to be available.
Pete paused for a while and then casually spoke. As he was talking, a commercial car drove over slowly.
She's here.
Only when they saw Andrea coming out of the car did they dare to believe it. It was just that they were still doubtful. Only a few members of the West family knew Andrea. After meeting more than 10 years later, they didn't quite know what to say to her. Edward noticed that Andrea's legs had gotten better. He greeted her and then walked up the steps solemnly. Only the executive assistant of the West family glanced at the car that Andrea had arrived in.
What is it?
Asked someone next to him. The executive assistant paused for a moment and said hesitantly,
Doesn't that car look like the Marshall family's?
The license plate of the big families in Evanston had specific area codes. The Marshall family's license plate was easy to remember.
Yeah, now that you mention it.
The person paused and squinted at the car.
The first 4 consecutive numbers are the same.
The two exchanged glances, thinking how Andrea had been in Evanston last night and had managed to come to Devil City in one night under the summit's strict circumstances. They exchanged shocked glances. After leaving the Marshall family's house, Bessy didn't return to Daniel's place. She went inside a bakery not far away instead. She had never liked sweet food and was addicted to spicy food. However, she was recently hooked on desserts. Michael was just 2 blocks away from here. The street wasn't sealed off, but the street next door was completely sealed off. Bessy held a spoon with one hand and her phone with the other. Her phone showed a message from Noah.
Great arranger, I have some time tomorrow. Do you want to go out for burgers together? I can show you my new song.
At the mention of burgers, Bessy frowned. But she didn't reject him and replied with an okay. Sitting opposite her, wearing gold-rimmed glasses, Minister Miller handed her a document.
Miss, this is the contract I'll be signing with Pinnacle Studios in the afternoon. Take a look.
The contract with Pinnacle Studios was mainly overseen by Bessy, and after signing the contract, Emmanuel asked the middle-aged man to let her witness it with her own eyes. Taking a bite of cake, Bessy put down her phone and reached out to accept the contract. The Miller family's contracts had always been professional and was very similar to what Bessy described, other than a clause that she hadn't noticed before. Only one internal test quota? Bessy paused slightly when she saw this clause.
Zeke requested this.
The minister glanced at her.
Miss, have you been drawing recently?
Yes. Bessy nodded without an ounce of guilt. The minister nodded, somewhat understanding why Emmanuel was at his wit's end with her. So many people in the company's programming department had come for the programming god, but had never had the chance to see her. No wonder Emmanuel didn't enjoy talking to those people. Otherwise, what if they asked where the programming god had gone in the middle of their chat? What could Emmanuel possibly say? That Bessy won't be going to the laboratory and had to run off to draw again?
By the way, this is the trial contract for the comic book. You can sign it first.
The minister took out another contract and handed a pen to her.
News of the Miller and Higgins families' arrangement will probably be released in the afternoon.
Bessy read through the contract and signed her name. There were 2 copies.
I'm going to bring these 2 contracts to Pinnacle Studios. Once he has stamped his signature, I'll hand you the other copy. I'll contact you again tomorrow.
The minister put away the contracts and bid her farewell. After getting out and getting into the car, he called Emmanuel. He reported to him about Bessy's state today. Pinnacle Studios. Shane was in the office asking people to check on Leonard. There were few secrets in the company, but one day, Shane had found out about the grievances between Theo and Leonard. Standing beside him, his secretary reported, "The 2 of them have personal grievances. Theo has wide connections, so the development will actually be better if we hand Magic Lamp to him. As for Leonard, he automatically applied for a transfer and will leave tomorrow. He was demoted from chief editor to an assistant."
Okay.
After listening, Shane's Adam apple rolled, and he waved his secretary out. When there was no one left in the office, he took out his phone and opened Magic Lamp's avatar on his friend page. He was speechless for a long while. He couldn't do anything regarding Leonard's affairs. He didn't know what personal grievances the 2 editors had, but Leonard had even submitted a transfer request himself. Shane wasn't surprised by this kind of transfer. He couldn't intervene easily either. After a long while, he took out his phone and sent a message to Bessy. Then, he stood in his office, thinking silently for a long while until someone knocked on the door and said that the Miller family was here.
The Miller family?
Returning to his senses, Shane adjusted his suit.
Take me to them.
Since the Miller family was based in Evanston, the Higgins family didn't have much contact with them. However, the Miller family's reputation had been rising recently, and there had even been rumors in the circle that the 4 major families in Evanston more or less had economic lifelines in Austria. When the Miller family came to him for cooperation, Shane had been in disbelief. After all, even the Higgins family hadn't obtained an arrangement with the Miller family. It wasn't until Minister Miller called him that he really believed it. He took the elevator down and bumped into the minister in the corridor.
Minister Miller.
Shane wore a black suit, looking tall, handsome, and gentle. He greeted the minister very politely. Minister Miller's expression was different from when he was complaining to Bessy just now, and his expression was very majestic at the moment. He greeted Shane by nodding solemnly. They entered the conference room to discuss cooperation. At the editorial department, Portia returned with Theo and witnessed this scene. They couldn't help but exchange glances. They didn't recognize Minister Miller. Who was that just now? It's the first time I saw Shane showing someone so much respect.
I don't know. I think his last name is Miller. Does Devil City have such a family? Have you guys forgotten the rumors inside the company? It's an impressive family in Evanston who wants to work with us.
They continued gossiping. A male author next to Portia smiled and glanced at her.
It's probably because of the internal quota test. Shane's comics have been adapted into movies and television shows, and big celebrities are even acting in them. He's definitely interested in this because of you.
Not necessarily. Portia smiled and said casually, the company has many other outstanding authors, like Magic Lamp.
No, she can't.
Recently, there had been many rumors about Magic Lamp in the company.
She doesn't have many works under her. Portia, I congratulate you in advance for working with one of Evanston's big families. Are you still afraid that no film and television company will find you?
The Miller family's promotions were no small thing. The cooperation between the two companies wasn't so simple. One was the best family in Devil City, and the other was an impressive family, even more powerful than the Higgins family. The collaboration between these two families was enough to shake the industry. Portia smiled and said nothing. Not far away, Leonard also heard this sentence. He paused and remained silent. Magic Lamp was indeed inferior to Portia, so it wouldn't be surprising if this promotion was given to Portia. Theo had always been the scornful type. He glanced at Portia and said,
Let's ask Michael later.
While talking, he glanced at his phone. He read the Twitter message he just received and his face instantly went dark. What's wrong? Portia noticed the change in his expression. Without answering her, he walked up to Leonard and sneered.
Leonard, you're really impressive.
Upon hearing this, Leonard turned to face him and frowned.
Theo, what are you implying? Don't beat around the bush. You've only been bluffing. Really impressive.
Theo stared at him with sharp eyes.
You want to continue snatching my people? Okay. I'll watch how you send them to the top. Leonard, I'm waiting for you.
Without so much as an explanation, he turned around and directly entered his office. Portia glanced at the two, raised an eyebrow and followed him. Theo's expression was vile when he entered the office. Although he was the Marshall family's illegitimate child, he was still considered a small overlord in Devil City because the family recognized him. He was aware of what kind of person could be provoked. When he first started out as an editor, the Marshall family had been in power. Hence, he had survived in the cracks without causing much trouble. Now that the Marshall family had stabilized and Colton didn't care much about him, he had moved daringly against Leonard. However, no one dared to say anything. He had a list of who couldn't be provoked in Devil City, and Leonard was obviously no longer on the list. What's the matter? Why are you so angry? Portia looked at him and sat down on the chair. Theo bit a cigarette with obscure eyebrows.
Those two people are blind.
Outside the editorial department, Cleo came over in high heels.
What on earth happened?
Leonard looked at her anxiously. Your magic lamp. Cleo looked complicatedly at him. I heard from someone in Theo's department that she personally told Theo that she wants to follow you. When else has Theo lost face like this?
What?
Upon hearing this, Leonard stood up directly and paced around in his office. His thoughts were complicated, and he was actually rather touched.
This magic lamp,
he whispered. She really loves you. Cleo paused. Are you touched? After thinking about it, she asked again. How old is she?
What nonsense are you thinking about?
Leonard glanced at her and frowned. Nodding, Cleo suppressed her inner thoughts. Let's talk about it next time. She straightened her expression and lowered her voice. I heard from Theo that Portia called him sir in private before. In Devil City, you know what kind of person you have to be for Portia to address you as sir. Leonard suddenly looked up. He knew about Theo's background, so he had given Magic Lamp to him previously. However, he didn't expect things to become complicated. Theo Marshall. In Devil City, the word Marshall alone was enough to crush a person. He directly called Magic Lamp. Magic Lamp seemed to be eating at the moment. Leonard heard the familiar lazy and casual male voice beside her. But he didn't care about that anymore and said directly,
"Magic lamp, what did you say to Theo? You're simply messing around."
On the other end, Bessy responded nonchalantly,
"Your three-dimensional matter is to move to the branch?" "I'm asking you about Theo."
After feeling touched, Leonard now felt desperate.
"Do you know how he is?"
"Leonard, are you free tomorrow?" Bessy directly interrupted his long theory. Leonard paused, his reins having always been held in Magic Lamp's hands.
"Yes."
"Shall we eat burgers together?" Bessy reached out and took the hot chocolate from Michael. Episode 588, The Fourth Son of the Marshall Family, Theo. Lunch? What was with this development? It's a long story. Bessy took a sip of milk tea and said slowly, "Let's eat and talk tomorrow." She hung up. Leonard was still in a daze. Next to him, Cleo had also heard the conversation. "Magic Lamp wants to eat lunch with you. She's also in Devil City?" Cleo looked at Leonard incredulously. Leonard was also stunned.
"I think so."
Then his phone rang again. Magic Lamp had just sent him an address. Looking at the address, he saw that it was a very famous upscale place in Devil City, and it wasn't too far away. Wasn't it too much of a coincidence? In fact, Cleo indiscriminately looked at him. Magic Lamp has always been reluctant to meet people, but she actually wants to meet you. Leonard glanced at her.
"Don't make wild guesses."
However, he indeed felt a little doubtful inside. Whenever he chatted with Magic Lamp and mentioned taking promotional photos or three-dimensional publicity, Magic Lamp would change the topic. Over time, Leonard had stopped mentioning it. He had always directly rejected activities in the company for Magic Lamp. Over the years, her habit had been embedded in his mind. But now that Magic Lamp wanted to meet him, he was indeed a little entranced. "Speaking of it, Magic Lamp's voice sounds rather nice too," Cleo said again. Then she straightened her expression and said seriously, "I'll go with you tomorrow. Let's clarify the matter between Theo and her." She knew that Leonard was worried that Theo would bury Magic Lamp because of this. The restaurant sent by Bessy had been Julius's recommendation. She had an appointment for lunch with Noah at 11 o'clock, but she already informed him that Leonard would also be coming. Noah wasn't bothered by these things and was already used to Bessy having many friends. At 10:30, the restaurant was still closed. Bessy arrived more than half an hour early because she had something to say to Leonard. This restaurant had a sleek theme, and the Marshall family had a special room here, which Julius had already reserved for Bessy. When she arrived, the restaurant opened its doors in advance, and the manager came out to greet her personally. Not long after she entered, Leonard and Cleo also arrived.
"Is your last name Perez?"
The manager saw Leonard coming forward and directly greeted him with a smile. Behind him, the four waiters looked grand, as though they were in a palace. Leonard and Cleo didn't expect such a scene. They exchanged glances and Leonard said,
"Yes, Miss Miller is already waiting for you. Please follow me."
The manager led the way. Soon, they arrived in an ornate room. There was a gold trim outside the room door with the name Marshall written on it. However, Leonard and Cleo didn't notice it. They were still in a state of shock. The manager reached out and was about to knock on the door when Marvin opened it. He was tall, half a head taller than Leonard, and also had rough features. Upon seeing Leonard, he turned sideways and ushered him in.
"Please come in quickly, Leonard. Miss Miller is inside."
While talking, he looked at Leonard. He thought lightly inside that this editor certainly didn't know how green with envy Emmanuel and Mr. Rostron were of him now. Leonard nodded cautiously.
Okay.
Marvin nodded solemnly at this moment. He let Leonard in and said in a very oppressive and solemn voice,
Come in quickly.
Leonard listened to his voice and found that it sounded different from the lazy voice he picked up from Magic Lamp's call.
Magic.
He was about to greet when he saw the people sitting at the square table. Leonard and Cleo had both read Celestial Wolf. Celestial Wolf's style was majestic, had a magnificent composition and a grand aura. The Celestial Wolf in their minds had a heroic aura. In short, they never thought it would be like a little girl and that she might not be good-looking either. However, the person sitting by the window also happened to look up and meet his eyes. Her complexion was snow white, her apricot eyes were slightly narrowed, and her facial features were perfect. While holding her earphone cable in her slender hands, she raised her chin slightly.
"Sit where you please,"
she said. The sunlight shining diagonally through the window imprinted on her, making her look beautiful and almost unrealistic. She was indeed not a little girl. She was a little cool, and carefreeness flowed through her eyes. This face, she could totally be a movie star. Opposite her, drinks were already placed on the table. There was another cup beside her. Leonard and Cleo sat down across from her, shocked beyond words. Especially Cleo, who couldn't help but raise her head and steal more glances at Bessy. She secretly thought to herself, if Magic Lamp's face was put in the comics world, what would happen to Portia? Magic Lamp, are you from Devil City? Cleo introduced herself and then asked Bessy. Bessy shook her head. No, I came to Devil City to play. Cleo let out a sigh of relief and nodded. No wonder. Once the two had calmed down, Leonard went back to business. He raised his head and looked seriously at Bessy.
Magic Lamp, I'll help you put in a good word with Theo later. You should stay under him. You're very popular now, so Theo won't make things difficult for you.
No. Bessy shook her head.
Magic Lamp.
Leonard stared solemnly at her.
Theo is the fourth son of the Marshall family. He has a wide range of connections. Fourth son of the Marshall family?
Marvin asked curiously. He had never heard Julius speak of him before.
You're not locals and don't know the Marshall family's status. You don't know how ruthless they are.
Leonard trailed off. Marvin got up and opened the door. Both Leonard and Cleo still didn't know what Marvin was doing. Just then, they saw a middle-aged man coming in with a briefcase.
Miss, I was dealing with business in Evanston. I asked my uncle to change the ticket and we'll have to fly back soon. I came to give you the contract in advance.
Minister Miller came in and hurriedly handed her the signed contract from yesterday. Episode 589, The Fated Meeting. With the Miller Corporation's recent rapid development and the return of the divided Miller family, credible management was still scarce. Minister Miller originally planned to stay in Devil City for 2 more days and look after Bessy. Too many people in the Miller family were missing her, but there were so many businesses to attend to that the headquarters had urgently called him back just now.
Sir, why are you so anxious? You're not eating lunch.
Out of the 5 brothers, Marvin was the one who visited the Miller family most and had the deepest relationship with the minister. The minister nodded.
James and Emmanuel are still waiting for my return.
Before turning to leave, he gave Bessy an earnest look.
Miss, eat less red meat. Emmanuel said.
Oh, stop. Bessy put her hands on the table and looked up blankly at him. Minister Miller, not today. Although he had borrowed Emmanuel's list, Minister Miller still didn't dare to act too presumptuously in front of his boss. After all, Emmanuel's computer had once been hacked by her. Although no one in the company said it, everyone knew that Emmanuel had been indifferent to her hacking him openly. Only Bessy could do this. He politely bade Bessy farewell and then left respectfully. Marvin sent him off. After he had left, Bessy leaned back and handed the exquisite menu to Leonard. "Leonard, please order some dishes first." Leonard had been abruptly interrupted before he could finish warning her about the fourth son of the Marshall family. He and Cleo were still staring at the door. Bessy handed him the menu, and Leonard subconsciously took it, his movements a little stiff. The two of them had naturally recognized the middle-aged man just now. He was the figure from Evanston that Shane had personally welcomed yesterday. In Devil City, it was rare to see Shane treat someone so respectfully, so Leonard and Cleo had remembered him clearly. Although Minister Miller looked very different from yesterday's elite, successful persona, they had both recognized him. Turning to the first page of the menu and looking at the words one by one, Leonard could only think about Bessy's affair and couldn't register the words at all. He cleared his throat.
"Magic lamp. That was
an elder from my family," Bessy explained calmly while holding the cup. Squeak! Upon returning, the squeak of the door opening as Marvin entered made Leonard and Cleo jump back to their senses. Marvin remembered that Leonard had been talking about one son of the Marshall family just now. He sat down in his seat and looked at him.
"You were talking about the fourth son of the Marshall family?"
Then he suddenly turned to Bessy.
"Miss Miller, should I ask Julius?"
"Whatever." Bessy was nonchalant and just squinted at Leonard. "Leonard, what issues do you have with Theo?"
"It's just some personal issues."
Leonard lowered his head and took a sip of his drink, suppressing his shock. He and Cleo weren't stupid and had been in the workplace for so many years. Not to mention, in Pinnacle Studios, the cooperation between the Higgins family and Evanston's Major family was also a sensation in Devil City. That Mr. Miller was so familiar with Magic Lamp and had even called her Miss. And Marvin had mentioned Julius. Leonard didn't know who he meant, but he knew that Marvin was probably talking about the Marshall family. Both of them subconsciously realized that Magic Lamp wasn't an average person, and could be a rich and beautiful lady. Okay, Bessy nodded and didn't ask further. She asked them to order again. Leonard randomly ordered a few dishes. Cleo also did so, in a daze. At 11 o'clock, after bringing appetizers, the service staff left to give the guests some time to discuss the main dishes. Leonard finally calmed down and didn't react as intensely. He continued talking seriously about Theo. While talking, he glanced at the seat beside Bessy. There was an empty cup on the table and silverware, but it wasn't for Marvin. "A friend is coming. Let's eat. He'll be here soon," Bessy explained when she saw him staring at the seat beside her. Then she reached out to start eating some of the appetizers they had ordered. Leonard didn't have much of an appetite after suffering such big blows from Magic Lamp. He nodded indiscriminately.
"Oh, you still have a friend coming."
2 minutes later, Marvin stood up again and opened the door. This time, it was a man wearing a mask, a black hat, and a black coat, despite the hot summer weather. Beside him was a fat, middle-aged man. He was shorter than Marvin. His face couldn't be seen, but his white, slender fingers looked like that of an artist. And he also exuded an artistic vibe.
"You're finally here."
Marvin closed the door behind them.
"I left more than an hour early, but there was traffic and sealed-off roads, so I arrived late."
The room was air-conditioned, so Noah took off his hat and mask and stuffed them into the pocket of his black coat. He directly walked over to take the seat beside Bessy, not at all curious about the two people sitting opposite her. He had come to know many people since Bessy's wedding. Even Simon was a little impressed by the people he knew now.
"Hello, I'm Noah."
Noah greeted Leonard and Cleo gently before sitting down. Bam! Cleo's cup overturned and fell to the ground. causing the clear drink to spill onto the floor.
Noah?
Noah Hyber. Cleo sucked in a deep breath. It was a very genuine reaction. When Zeke's studio first liked Portia's Twitter post, the editorial department had talked about it many times. Zeke and Noah were crowned kings in different fields of the entertainment industry. Cleo and Leonard didn't pay much attention to the entertainment industry, but they had heard Noah's songs before, and had even watched his music videos played in the square. They could forcibly be considered Noah's staff, but according to Noah's status in the music world, he was indeed very different from ordinary people.
Are you two locals of Devil City?
Noah and Bessy weren't very fond of talking, and only Simon was good at socializing. Having been in the entertainment industry for so long, he calmly asked about Leonard and Cleo. Noah and Simon didn't seem as cold and difficult to approach as Leonard and Cleo imagined. They even seemed kind of pleasant. Leonard and Cleo quickly relaxed. They chatted with Simon and Marvin. Opposite, Noah was talking to Bessy.
When will you return to Evanston?
Noah took a sip of some soup. Bessy held her fork. It depends on the situation. I've other things to do here.
The arrangement for these 2 months.
Without even turning her head, Bessy said calmly, I don't know. I don't have time. Don't ask me. Noah rubbed his nose and nodded. Then he asked about something else. It was very simple. He wanted to be Bessy's child's godfather. They chatted and ate for 2 hours. Bessy only finished half of her meal, and then the service staff served dessert and watermelon. After eating, the manager asked Bessy if she wanted to watch their show together. Bessy rejected him. The manager and Noah left first. Bessy then turned to Leonard and handed the contract Minister Miller handed her to him. Leonard, this is for you.
What's this?
Leonard took the document wrapped in craft paper. You'll know once you read it. Bessy waved to him and bid her farewell. Don't be so afraid of that 4th son. Bessy got into Michael's car, parked opposite. When the black car drove away, Cleo and Leonard exchanged glances. Cleo coughed. Magic Lamp is really beyond my expectation. She's not short of money at all. No wonder she isn't afraid of him. Judging by the car that picked her up, she didn't know what car it was, but she recognized the emblem. It wasn't cheap at all. Sighing, Cleo looked at the file in Leonard's hands and asked, curiously, what is it? She remembered that Mr. Miller had given this to Magic Lamp. Leonard nodded and opened the envelope. Inside was a document. Episode 590. The New Representatives of Pinnacle Studios. Leonard directly took it out. Pinnacle Studios copyright agreement. He skimmed through the words and was stunned. The front part of the contract was a little long and mainly talked about regulations. He skipped past it and turned to the last page. At the back was the internal beta copyright contract signed between Celestial Wolf 2 and the Miller Corporation. There were 3 signatures underneath, including Celestial Wolf, Pinnacle Studios, and the Miller Corporation. Leonard stood rooted to the ground, unable to regain his composure for a long time. Cleo pressed her heart and stuttered. Leonard, isn't this the quota assigned to Portia? Moreover, with Magic Lamp's rookie status. How did she obtain the contract? At the West family's house, after paying respect to Alan, Edward invited Andrea back to the West family's house. Standing in front of the mausoleum under the hot sun, Andrea was a little still and silent. Glancing at Edward, her dark eyes gradually deepened. It's okay. She politely rejected him.
I'm holding a banquet to introduce Pete to the people in the circle.
Edward tried again. No, Andrea shook her head. Edward, if it's okay, I'll go back with Pete first. They had to return to his place, where Michael would come by to see her at night. Edward remained silent and only nodded silently. Standing at the back, Alec watched as Edward got into the car. At the same time, his phone rang. He looked and saw that it was the lawyer. He picked up as he got into the car. Alec's expression changed greatly when he heard the lawyer.
What?
After a long while, he finally hung up and asked the driver to drive to the city instead. His expression was dark. In the evening, Portia returned home after discussing with Theo. As soon as she arrived in the lobby, she saw Alec waiting there. Dad? She was a little confused. She didn't stay in the West family's house and usually stayed in her own apartment. These days, she had only actively returned to the West family's house to improve goodwill with the old man.
Portia.
Alec turned around and looked at her, his face dark.
Do you know what your grandpa put in his will?
Portia was stunned. A will?
Yes.
Alec sneered.
He gave Pete 1/3 of the West family's properties. Does he even see me in his eyes at all?
There were so many people in the West family who had inheritance rights. Pete had only just returned to the West family, so him receiving 1/3 of the inheritance really angered Alec.
I worked so hard for the West family all these years for him to give everything to someone else.
Portia knew that Edward liked Pete, but she didn't expect him to be so muddle-headed. However, she wasn't as anxious as her father. Dad, don't worry. The West family properties will be ours in the end. I'm going to be busy in Evanston from now on. You just keep an eye on the West family for now.
Evanston?
Alec was taken aback. Lowering her voice, Portia smiled faintly. The Miller family of the 4 major families in Evanston. Alec stared at her, then smiled proudly.
Yes, you're my daughter indeed.
Not only did he have a good relationship with Shane, but he also had connections in Evanston. For Alec and the others, this was the best trump card. With this trump card, everyone would surely stand on their side when it came to it.
But Pete...
Alec's eyes sharpened.
I can't let it go.
The West family had changed too much regarding Pete these days. Portia sat down on the sofa and opened Twitter. Sure enough, news of the arrangement between the Miller family and Pinnacle Studios was already released by the authorities. The Miller family officially also issued a notice that the authors would receive many benefits from the Miller family in the arrangement. Most of the fans were wondering if this partner was Portia. Reading through the fan comments, Portia gave a like to the fan who guessed it was her. She had a lot of fans on Twitter. The moment her liked comment appeared on her homepage, her fans instantly became active. It even went on the hot search. In the evening, at the place rented by Pete, Michael and Bessy came over for dinner to eat Andrea's food. After dinner, Andrea went to wash the dishes and asked Bessy to help her out. Michael stayed outside to educate Pete.
Don't be like your cousin and be so indecisive.
Michael sat on the sofa with a teacup and glanced at him. He slowly lectured.
Physics is a good thing. The Research Institute will have to rely on you in the future. Of course, you can take the West family at will if you want. But if you don't want to, leave it to someone you trust in the future.
Pete nodded.
Okay.
He already understood this clearly. Michael wanted to hand over the physics researcher's mantle to him so that Bessy would be less involved in the future. Bessy came out of the kitchen thoughtfully.
Are we leaving?
Michael put down the teacup and walked over to hold her waist.
I'll go say goodbye to your aunt.
Bessy nodded silently. They left together. In the elevator, Michael looked down at her.
What did she say?
Just... Bessy slowly leaned on him. Do apartments in Devil City have courtyards as well? Taken aback, Michael looked down at her. Without speaking any more, Bessy continued looking thoughtful. The next day, on Monday, Pinnacle Studios headquarters. The creators of the best comics of Pinnacle Studios had their own studios and assistants. Every day, comics, line drafts, and many trivial matters of copyright were handled by their assistants and staff. Magic Lamp was the only one not among these well-known authors, as she never showed up. This was also one of the reasons why many people speculated that Magic Lamp was too bad-looking. The editors didn't hold a meeting today, mainly because of the Miller Corporation's case. Inside, after the general manager talked to all the editors about the cooperation, he turned to a few top-tier authors.
If the new management is successful, we'll continue to work with the Miller Corporation for a long time in the future. Every author will have a chance. This time, we'll select an internal author as a representative. At the same time, we'll select an editor to communicate with the Miller Corporation.
He clicked on the remote control and turned to the next slide of the presentation. As soon as he said this, the conference room instantly became heated with discussions. They were all congratulating Portia. The male author beside her even smiled and said,
"Portia, it must be you and Theo."
Episode 591, Provoking the Boss. Other than congratulations, there was also envy. Theo was the one who gave me the opportunity. Portia smiled modestly. Several male authors smiled and thought of the latest rumor.
By the way, Theo, has Magic Lamp left your group again? It's her loss.
Upon hearing this, Theo glanced in Leonard's direction faintly, but he didn't expect Leonard to be sitting there without a hint of panic on his face. He couldn't help but frown, feeling rather surprised.
She's just a small fry,
Theo sneered, thinking of how he would make them pay for it next time. He turned to her and said,
"Portia, go onto Twitter later and blow this matter up even more."
As he spoke, he realized that the sounds of congratulations between them gradually became quieter. In the end, complete silence ensued. The male author who had just complimented him stared at him as if he had seen a ghost. Seeing this, Theo couldn't help but narrow his eyes and abruptly turn around. The next slide appeared on the screen, and the content couldn't be simpler. Internal author, Magic Lamp. Internal editor, Leonard. The smile on Theo's face disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye. After the meeting, he walked up to Leonard and said through gritted teeth,
"Leonard, good for you."
He sneered coldly and went straight out. Upon seeing this result, the others in the conference room didn't dare to talk to Leonard anymore, and avoided him. Everyone knew Theo's family background. Everyone had congratulated her just now when they thought it would be her. After all, both she and Theo had pillars of support behind them, and were here to mess with the system. "Are you all right?" Cleo was a little worried. Leonard shook his head.
"I'm not sure either, but Theo probably won't cause a big scene. Will he?"
The two exchanged glances and remained silent. Theo's office. Portia came in with her phone. Although she was in a bad mood, she didn't show it. Beside her, her assistant barged in ferociously.
"Portia, Theo, I just heard that Leonard met up with Magic Lamp. Some people even took pictures of them." "They met up? No wonder they conspired to obtain the contract. I'll ask Shane about it."
Theo's expression was ice cold. Portia remained silent and only looked hurt. Her assistant was furious, on the other hand. She took out her phone and showed them a picture. "Look, this is the picture they took secretly." She enlarged the image for Theo to see. In the picture was a female whose face was full of acne. She had buck teeth, a mole on her mouth, and her skin was also yellow.
"This is Magic Lamp?"
Theo averted his eyes. If he gave the picture a second glance, he felt like his eyes would be polluted. He directly went out to find Shane. Portia remained in the office, looking thoughtful. She opened Twitter and saw that Pinnacle Studios had already publicized the arrangement with Magic Lamp. It was on the third hot search. This matter had been on the hot search ever since yesterday. After everyone sent their congratulations, they realized that something was wrong. Wasn't it Portia who was on the hot search yesterday? Portia had even liked the comment. When did it become Magic Lamp? The netizens started discussing it furiously. Portia was like a mini celebrity. She looked no less than a celebrity and was a talented woman. She had countless loyal fans. Soon, with her big investment, Portia's fans approached her assistant and asked him what was going on. Portia's assistant was too furious at this time. In terms of fame and value, the default candidate should have been Portia. Everyone in the company had thought so as well, but who knew that they would be cut off? He typed furiously. It was all because of that old lady, Magic Lamp. She even asked her editor out for lunch. Puke. This spot was supposed to be Portia. Everyone in the company knows about it. The entire editorial department was shocked and senseless when they heard the announcement just now. Our sister and Theo worked so hard for this matter, but this is what they get in the end? She must be terribly upset. Then, he even sent a picture of Magic Lamp. Portia already had many fangirls and fanboys. Upon seeing this explanation, everyone exploded. Their goddess's big resources had just been snatched by someone, and their goddess was now heartbroken. How could they let it be? Portia's fan site sent this news to several groups, causing an entire group of fans to become angry. 10 minutes later, Portia's fan site also posted, at Pinnacle Studios, at Magic Lamp. The comics industry is so disgusting now. To use unspoken rules to bully our sister? This spot was originally our sister's, but why did it suddenly become Magic Lamp's? WTF? Also, a certain editor of Pinnacle Studios, you're able to do it with someone who looks like that? Picture. Our fans collectively demand a statement from Pinnacle Studios. Otherwise, all fans will resist Celestial Wolf and the convenient 4-dimensional reading. Portia's fans weren't just talking big, and her second-rate celebrity influence wasn't fake either. In the next second, her fans occupied Pinnacle Studios' turf. Many people were cursing Magic Lamp and Pinnacle Studios management. The face of comics? Isn't it too overblown? She dared to snatch Miss Yates's resources? Is she disregarding our millions of fans? Magic Lamp wants to step on Miss Yates. I can see that. Unfortunately, she's only shooting herself in the foot. Some people also went to Zeke and the Miller Corporation's Twitter. Chairman Miller, quickly change the author. Portia originally had a lot of fans, and her fans weren't short of money. They even bought robots to blow the matter up even more. Soon, several hot searches appeared. The impact of this incident was too great. The hot searches were hidden rules, snatching resources, behind the scenes, and Magic Lamp's picture. When the person in charge of Pinnacle Studios' public relations department saw it, he naturally reported it to Shane. The rapid development of this matter also alarmed the Miller family. You haven't removed the hot searches? Shane looked at the chief of the public relations department. The chief shook his head. The official said that someone paid to hang the system for an hour, and it can't be suppressed. You know Theo. The chief was obviously implying something. Pursing his lips, Shane knew that Theo must have put pressure on Twitter. He got up and said, Call a meeting and gather them all. In the meeting room, Shane looked at Theo. You messed with the online system, right? I'm just defending the author under me. Shane, if you don't believe me, it's because you don't know how rich the resources are from the Miller family's corporation this time. In the company, only you and Portia are worthy of it. But it suddenly became Magic Lamp. Don't you need to give us a reason? You think Portia and I are easy to bully? Theo was self-righteous. Leonard was so angry that his eyes turned red.
Just come at me, whatever it is. Why are you cyberbullying a girl? Huh, Leonard, I don't know what you're talking about.
Theo sneered at him.
If you dare to do it, why are you afraid of telling others the truth? Otherwise, tell me, how did the Miller family's contract fall into Magic Lamp's hands? Don't bullshit me.
Upon seeing Theo's behavior, Leonard knew that there was no resolving this matter.
If there's nothing else, Shane, I'll take my leave first.
Theo left directly. In the meeting room, Shane's expression changed. He let out a sigh of relief after a long while. Taking out his cell phone, he clicked on Magic Lamp's Twitter and was about to send something. However, he kept deleting the message and typing again, and eventually sent this.
Don't be too bothered about what's happening on Twitter.
Bessy never enjoyed following what was happening on Twitter. Upon receiving this message, she paused while playing a game. Outside the conference room in Pinnacle Studios, Portia waited for Theo to come out and said worriedly, "Theo, it's okay. Why don't we just forget about it? I can just give up the resources." She sighed. Film God is a fan of Magic Lamp. With her comics as the cover page and Film God's fan base, I'm afraid.
What could happen? Don't worry. If she really knows Film God, she would have asked him to post on Twitter already.
Theo took out a cigarette and said indifferently. They were really blowing the matter up, and there was no taking it back. Not long after, the Miller family's headquarters also received mentions on Twitter.
Please give Miss Yates a statement from your company. Hello? I want to know how your company selected the author. Hee hee.
Smile. Episode 592. Escalating Incident. Magic Lamp's contract has been terminated. The netizens were really blowing the matter out of proportion. Some marketing accounts only had to say a few words to promote it to the hot search page, and the interest naturally arose. In particular, the traffic in the comics industry had recently reached its peak, and Zeke had been a hot topic recently as well. At first, many fans and netizens wandered back and forth between the accounts of Pinnacle Studios and Magic Lamp. Now, Theo had personally made a move and added fuel to the flames. This made Portia's fans even more convinced that their little sister was seriously wronged. They all sent the same tags using their accounts. At Pinnacle Studios, at Miller Corporation. Unspoken rules weren't uncommon in the entertainment circle and market industry. However, these were usually hidden from view, and when they were displayed, those people would definitely be nailed to the pillar of shame. Pinnacle Studios had always been harmonious, but now it was time for it to choose a side. Another marketing group was also being controlled by Theo, and this matter was discussed in almost every comic group. Things had developed to a point where other authors had left the team. The residential area where Bessy was living temporarily. Michael was sitting on the stool next to Bessy, pressing her slender fingers on the keyboard and calmly moving the opposite attack card. Outside, Marvin knocked carefully on the door. Putting down his hand and moving the card behind Bessy's character, Michael said in a low voice, "I have matters to attend to. You play first." Wendy's star rating wasn't as high as Mary's. She was only at the supreme level, 1 star. It wasn't difficult for Bessy to defeat her, not to mention how Michael had also seconded the opponent's core output point. Michael pulled the chair out and stood up. Then, he turned around so that Bessy wouldn't see his face turn cold instantly. He glanced at Marvin and motioned for him to come to the study. In the study, Marvin's expression sank as soon as he entered. "Michael, why don't you let my brother go to the public relations marketing account?" As a loyal fan of Magic Lamp, Marvin naturally paid attention to Magic Lamp's matters on the internet. He knew the turmoil online before anyone else. "Wait a while longer." Michael turned on the computer on the desk and read Twitter and the marketing account information. The matter online had developed into an unsightly situation. His expression was emotionless. and even his voice was calm and steady. However, having followed him for so many years, Marvin naturally knew that Michael was already at the center of the storm.
This is the Higgins family information. Shane is very concerned about Miss Miller.
Marvin handed a copy of the information to Michael and scratched his head.
My brother said that this matter is related to the Civil War in Devil City.
This information had come from the Marshall family. Michael flipped through it casually. Although Shane was the Michael of the Higgins family, his parents had died in an air crash, so he didn't have anyone behind him. He had a cousin who was above him, Xavier, but he could still control the limit he went with his own means. There had been no problems for so many years. Xavier had secretly made a lot of moves, but he couldn't pull Shane off the horse, especially at this time. Shane was still cooperating with the Miller family, so he naturally couldn't sit still. Now that Magic Lamp and Portia's matter had been blown up so big, he naturally had to take part in it. The Higgins and Marshall families had joined forces to create a small author. Innocent people would be pulled into trouble as well. After reading it, Michael casually flipped it back to the front page and looked up lightly at Marvin.
Tell the Miller family that we'll let the things ferment on Twitter first. Leave it alone for a while.
Marvin nodded without understanding his intentions. However, he still informed Jack accordingly. Michael directly called Colton. Upon seeing Michael's call, Colton was a little surprised. He raised his hand to stop the managers in the meeting and walked aside with his phone.
Michael?
There was a trace of fear in his voice.
I want to ask you something,
Michael said in a light-hearted voice. Colton raised an eyebrow.
Yes?
Michael said a few words, surprising Colton.
What did Michael say?
Upon seeing Colton's surprised expression, several people gathered around, and Julius spoke first. Colton tapped his mobile phone with his finger and shook his head slightly. He pondered for a long time before saying,
It has nothing to do with us, mainly the Higgins family. I wonder what Xavier did. Can you check it out? If Michael is out to get him, he can forget about the Higgins family's patriarch position.
Behind him, several people exchanged glances.
Michael is so powerful to even control the matters in Devil City? In terms of scheming, there are a few things in the world that can work against him.
Colton sucked in a deep breath.
This person must never be our enemy.
Speaking of this, he thought of something and turned to Julius.
Theo hasn't caused any trouble, right?
No,
he has stayed silently in his company recently,
said Julius.
Although he's an unscrupulous businessman, he's not that dumb. Okay.
Colton nodded and instructed.
Let the Higgins family informer bring this piece of news to Xavier.
Julius directly went to contact the informer and then returned with another message.
You mean the Higgins family has provoked Miss Clark?
Colton stood there for a long time and stuttered.
They're crazy. No wonder he is personally making a move.
Julius nodded. In the past few days, they could tell it was fine to offend Michael, as he would still give a slight chance to breathe. But if Bessy was offended... At the Miller Corporation. The Miller Corporation's headquarters didn't have an official Twitter before. Later on, after Emmanuel joined them, the management department had finally set up a Twitter account. Their Twitter had been established for less than a year. However, this Twitter only reposted some activities and advertisements usually, and only had a few 100,000 fans, most of which were fans of Zeke and Bessy. The official blog saw the tag from Portia's fans within half an hour. Bessy was the boss of the entire Miller family, and even Emmanuel and Zeke weren't as popular in the Miller family as she was. The Minister of Public Relations clicked on the most popular comment.
Please explain how your company selects people.
The Minister of Public Relations sneered coldly and directly went to contact his boss.
Wait, a while more?
Upon hearing this, he looked at the Twitter page and suppressed himself.
How much longer?
He almost exploded.
A little while more, at night.
Minister Miller sounded quite calm on the phone.
Let him slowly reel in the big fish. I'll go and inform Zeke after.
Okay. The Public Relations Department suppressed their anger. After hanging up, he received a call again within a few minutes. This time, it was Zeke's manager who called.
When you can control the comments, tell me before you post.
Film God said calmly.
I think these people have forgotten the fear of being dominated by the tyrant of Northwestern University.
At the same time, Shane was also contacting the Miller Corporation at Pinnacle Studios. His secretary was by his side, along with several other senior executives.
Sir, don't worry about this matter. Twitter is still afraid to withdraw the results from the hot search. There are definitely signs of Xavier inside. I know you're Magic Lamp's fan, but in this situation, he has something to use against you and is taking the opportunity to snatch the CEO position of Pinnacle Studios. If that's the case, then our hard work for so many years would have been wasted.
Shane held up his phone.
If this matter isn't resolved, Magic Lamp will be abandoned.
He lowered his eyes.
I'll contact the Miller Corporation.
Magic Lamp's matter had been started first by the Miller Corporation. Although he was a member of the family, he didn't have parents. So the power accumulated behind him was weak, and he couldn't go against Xavier. If the Miller Corporation was willing to come out to help Magic Lamp, then everything would be resolved. With its current status, if the Miller Corporation really stepped forward, would Twitter dare to not withdraw the hot search? Shane's expression changed after he hung up. Several senior executives and his secretary immediately knew the Miller Corporation's decision after seeing his expression. They exchanged glances, knowing the result at the bottom of their hearts.
Xavier, Shane is having a meeting inside. Please wait.
There was a sudden, loud noise outside.
Boom!
The door was pushed open, and a gloomy man walked in, looking at Shane indifferently.
Cousin, Grandpa asked me to take over Pinnacle Studios.
As soon as he said this, the entire meeting room exploded. This meant that Shane, who had been in full swing before, was now completely abandoned. Shane was stunned, thinking that even if it was because of Magic Lamp, it didn't amount to this.
Grandpa said that?
Shane glanced at Xavier and stood up without an ounce of submission.
I'll go to him. During this time, don't interfere with the company's affairs. Leave Magic Lamp's affairs alone.
Shane left the room and called his grandpa. Smiling, Xavier watched as he left, and then said lightly to the people around him,
"Make an announcement that Magic Lamp's contract has been terminated."
Episode 593, A Complete Reversal.
Xavier has terminated the contract with Magic Lamp?
Upon hearing this news, Theo and Portia were both very surprised. Theo didn't expect to have such great power. He took his phone and gave Portia a call.
This is the way it should be. That ugly girl is nothing. Portia, I'll really have to congratulate you in advance this time.
Portia paused. She really hadn't expected this to happen in the beginning. After all, the contract had been signed, so she had only wanted to make use of this incident to stir up her popularity. Who knew that Pinnacle Studios would back off itself? As an open-minded person, she had always been arrogant and conceited after going smoothly over the years. Hence, she didn't feel like her career would be overturned. Upon linking the incidents together, she inevitably thought that the Miller family also valued her talent. At this time, her mind became active, and her heart rate was twice as fast as it was before. She could sign a contract with Evanston's Miller family. She had already returned to the West family. Today, Pete was also eating at the West family's house. He had come to inquire about Alan and the loss of his old ministry. Portia's emotions had always been well controlled, but she really couldn't hide her joy this time. Edward noticed it and coughed twice before slowly asking,
Portia, Is there a reason you are so happy? Let me guess.
Before Portia could reply, Alec took the lead to guess the reason. He laughed out loud and said,
Portia is about to sign a contract with Evanston's Miller family.
Sitting beside Edward, Pete was initially talking to an old employee of the West family. However, upon hearing the familiar name, he paused and looked up at Portia. Portia didn't notice his stare because everyone in the room was focusing their attention on her. She picked up a tissue and wiped the corners of her mouth. I'm almost signing the contract. That meant that she basically nailed it already. Upon hearing this, most of the West family eagerly looked at her and asked her about the Miller family. Only Pete remained silent and withdrew his gaze. After the meal, Benson sent Pete off. Before he got into the car, Pete stuck his hands in his pocket and said, Benson, about Portia's matters. It's best if the West family doesn't take part. What? Benson didn't understand. Pete didn't say much and left. Benson stood at the gates and thought about it for a long while. He then went to find Edward and the project director to tell him about Pete's strange reaction. He really said that? Edward looked hesitant. Benson nodded. I always feel like Pete's family isn't normal, especially his cousin. His cousin seems to be related to the Miller family. Miller? The project director knew about the experimental drug incident and suddenly looked up. Is she from the Miller family? What's her relationship with them? Portia is overconfident about this matter. Benson, go and talk to her. Edward had already understood the ins and outs of the matter from his former employee. He thought for a long time and then said solemnly, This Miller family suddenly told Shane not to care about this. I keep feeling like something is wrong. Okay, Benson. I know what you mean. I know what to do now. After listening to Benson, Portia politely sent him out. Thank you for your consideration. I'll consider it carefully. Portia had also grown up under Benson, so he was well aware of what she was thinking at this moment. She had always been arrogant and was used to being spoiled as a child, so how could she possibly follow Benson's advice? Especially since her opponent was a person like Magic Lamp, who didn't even dare to show her face. Ultimately, she really couldn't care less. After sending him out, she looked at her Twitter page, filled with congratulations and comforting words. Her followers had increased by 70,000. Her mind started spinning actively. If she became the first person to cooperate with the Miller family's convenient four-dimensional reading, her worth would almost match that of Logan Higgins. She thought for a while and finally posted, Thank you, everyone. I'll never forget the sense of justice you guys have shown. 10 p.m. The matter had almost reached its end. After Portia posted on Twitter, her followers rose to 200,000. Fans of her stories had grown stronger. At the same time, the Miller family's public relations department and Film Gods studio had been working overtime. Most of them were Bessy's fans, and the Miller family had an obvious feature. They were fiercely protective of their own family. At 10:05 p.m., the manager received a call from the Miller Corporation. He hung up and smiled widely. Biting his cigarette, he tilted his head slightly at the person voluntarily working overtime in the studio and said, You can start now. The staff member held up his keyboard and grinned. Brother, don't worry, I can even play against 10 people. Were they seeking their own death by cursing Bessy? Not to mention Film Gods fans protecting her. Just the inclusion of BM's fans was not something Portia could compare to. Leonard's house. He poured 2 cups of tea and handed one to Cleo and the other to an author. He was already off work at Pinnacle Studios, and they had come over to discuss some matters. Cleo was talking on the phone. How is it? Leonard looked at her after she finally hung up. What did your marketing friend say? Who did Magic Lamp offend? Cleo scratched her head, looking very irritable. My friend said that all marketing accounts received the news in the afternoon and were not allowed to receive orders about Magic Lamp. Portia and Theo are really so capable? They could even control the entire network? Didn't we see Mr. Miller last time? Cleo glanced at him. Why didn't he come out and say something? I'm pretty sure that Magic Lamp has something to do with the Miller Corporation. However, according to the company's internal news this afternoon, the Miller family didn't care about this matter at all. They had even disregarded the termination of Pinnacle Studios' contract with Magic Lamp. Cleo's heart was now very chaotic. As for the photos on the internet, who posted them? Cleo's expression was wiped off of all smiles. Perhaps because of the hot pot lunch, she actually felt like Magic Lamp was a pretty good kid. Leonard, call Magic Lamp and ask how she's holding up. Also, tell her not to post her photo. At present, Magic Lamp was being cursed so widely by the netizens. Cleo was afraid that they would chew off her human flesh if her pictures were exposed. Such a big thing was too stressful for a girl. Nodding, Leonard took out his phone to call Magic Lamp. The phone rang once and was picked up. However, there was only light breathing on the other end. Leonard's expression changed. Magic Lamp? Magic Lamp, are you okay? What's wrong? After hearing a door close, he heard a polite voice say,
Leonard, hello. Magic Lamp is already asleep. If there's anything, you can tell me.
The voice was lowered and also sounded a little lazy and casual. There was a slight degree of arrogance. Upon hearing this voice, Cleo and the author next to Leonard were taken aback. However, Leonard wasn't surprised.
Oh, it's good that she's asleep.
Since the gentleman's voice wasn't hurried nor angry, Leonard paused for a moment and asked again,
Sir, do you know about Magic Lamp's incident online?
On the other end of the phone, Michael leaned against the window at the end of the corridor. He put a cigarette into his mouth, but didn't light it. Looking down at the neon lights outside, he chuckled and said,
You guys have worked hard this afternoon. Rest assured, this matter is coming to an end.
They exchanged a few more words and then hung up. Leonard was a little stunned. He didn't quite understand this development. Leonard, that man. Cleo had heard Michael's voice and couldn't help but ask. Leonard returned to his senses in a daze.
I think he's Magic Lamp's husband.
Cleo widened her eyes. She got married so early?
It's not the time to talk about this now.
Leonard shook his head.
What did that Mr. Clark mean?
As soon as he finished speaking, the little author sitting next to him seemed to have read something on Twitter. His whole body froze and he stuttered.
Leonard, Cleo,
Leonard and Cleo were a little flustered.
What happened? It's blowing up again? No, that's not the case. Take a look.
He showed them the Twitter page. The first post was the Miller Corporation's official Twitter, which had reposted a fan's message.
Us fans collectively ask for Pinnacle Studios to give us a statement. Otherwise, we'll boycott Celestial Wolf and the convenient 4-dimensional reading.
Smile. Then, the account had attached a comment.
It was originally a convenient 4-dimensional reading designed for her. It's the first work for her. What's wrong?
Film God reposted it, saying,
Dare to take Miss Yates's resources? Are you disregarding our millions of fans?
Then, the account had attached a comment.
Are the hundreds of millions of fans of Northwestern University's Tyrant still here? I'm waiting online. It's quite urgent.
Episode 594. Compiling Her 7 Identities. Just as everyone's attention was still on the current affair, someone had placed the blame on the president of Pinnacle Studios, Shane, as though it was planned. As it was already late at night, there weren't a lot of active discussions. The Miller Corporation's Twitter never had many followers. But, due to today's incident, there was a surge in the number of followers. There was even a trending topic called Pinnacle Studios. As the original post was created with that tag, Miller Corporation's retweet also had that tag. This attracted the attention of the netizens. Pinnacle Studios had announced that it had terminated its contract with Magic Lamp, but the Miller Corporation didn't say a word. It was their first reply. The post was written by the head of public relations in the Miller Corporation. It went straight to the point. However, the netizens were confused by the content. Did she write it herself? What did this mean? Was she referring to Magic Lamp? Give me a moment, I think I'm onto something. Let me check on it. Give me a moment too. Damn, Magic Lamp was her too? I must be going crazy. Damn, I need a little while to come to terms with this. Some of the nasty netizens didn't care what the post was about and wrote their pre-planned thoughts. You guys should apologize to Miss Yates. I'm so disappointed by your attitude. I'll be boycotting your products in the future. They were waiting for people to like their comments after they published them. However, they didn't receive any likes. They got replies instead. Bro, you're just a troll, right? Have you seen what the Miller Corporation wrote? What an idiot! Aren't you embarrassed? The people who commented were fans of Miss Yates. They panicked after reading the comments and went to refresh their web page. Everything was going well in the Miller Corporation. There was nothing big going on. The worst was from the Twitter post written by Zeke's studio. The Northwestern University School Tyrant sticker pack was still there. Some of the senior netizens could still recall the trending tags. Freshman Queen and Northwestern University School Tyrant 2 years ago. Many people kept messaging Film God's Twitter to ask about his niece, especially his fans. When the phrase was mentioned, the fans immediately remembered Bessy. Is everyone online? Let's go. Damn, look what I found. At BM, time for you to do your job. It was only after the chit-chat that they recalled what they were supposed to do. Can I confess I was still catching up on the first episode of The Celestial Wolf? What kind of fan are you? Some fans were following the saga between Pinnacle Studios and the Miller Corporation. But as Zeke was going to star in The Realm of the Gods, they knew what had happened to Miss Yates and Magic Lamp. Other fans weren't aware of what had happened, but they managed to dig out everything from Twitter. Zeke's manager wasn't known to be low profile. He knew how to get everyone's attention. Hence, even though the BM handle didn't have many posts, it had 80 million followers. Bessy had removed most of her photos from Twitter. Even so, she had a lot of fans, including those who supported her because of her beauty or because of the School Tyrant title. They were fans from academia, show business, esports, and infotech. They were from everywhere. Her fans were arrogant like her as well. Even though Miss Yates had a positive branding of being a beautiful writer, her influence was nowhere near the top influencers in the entertainment industry. There was no way she could be compared to Bessy, who had crashed the Twitter servers previously. What does this mean? Leonard and Cleo were surprised by Twitter, which had 30,000 comments. They fished out their phones and opened up Twitter. However, their phone only showed a display error. They thought that their Wi-Fi signal was bad and changed over to their mobile data. However, it continued to show the error. After attempting a few more times, Leonard realized that Twitter's servers might have been overloaded. The two of them then stared at each other. It was only after 5 minutes that Twitter was back to normal. Leonard, Cleo, and the writer immediately opened up Twitter. The trending topics had changed completely. BM, trending. God Bessy, trending. Northwestern University School Tyrant, trending. Magic Lamp, trending. Twitter servers crashed, trending. Leonard didn't know much about the first 3 topics. Hence, he immediately tapped on the 4th tag. An account had compiled all the juicy stories in one post, and there were 120,000 comments. The creator of the post was shocked too. It must have gone unnoticed because of the large number of posts. Who would have thought that she would have another account? But before that, let me clear up her name. Head on over to this website. It's the link to Celestial Wolf too. Everyone knows that she's a really talented artist. The software she used to draw was created by herself. Her profile had a lot of links. Many artists have used her free software. The team-up between the Miller Corporation and Pinnacle Studios was because of her request. Finally, she remembered that she was the chief engineering officer of the Miller Corporation. Emmanuelle is probably crying every day. She wanted to introduce her personal software to the comic world. Thus, the Miller Corporation selected her Celestial Wolf 2 without hesitation. Chairman Miller, could you be honest next time? It was obvious that Celestial Wolf 2 was the only choice. Hence, there wasn't a problem for Celestial Wolf 2 to be selected. Feel free to add into the conversation. Bessy had a lot of fans, and a majority of them had professional knowledge. Fans of Miss Yates and People Against Magic Lamp wanted to continue their accusations. But as they read the comments, they doubted themselves. Even accounts from academia, IT, and show business had given their support. What other accusations could they throw against Magic Lamp? That Magic Lamp was hogging up all the resources? Let's look at the 10 most popular comments. First, Noah Hyber, I give my support. Second, OST Toby Yearling, I give my support. Third, Ava Hutchinson, question mark. Fourth, Northwestern University official, meow. Fifth, Film Enterprise, haha. There was finally a normal name, Ian Walsh, all the best. It was such a common name that no netizen could recognize him. He wasn't a celebrity, nor was he a gamer, but his comment had garnered so many likes and comments. Even Film God and Northwestern University had liked his comment. Hence, most of the netizens clicked on his profile out of curiosity. It turned out that Ian Walsh was a verified account. Champion of the ICNE, senior researcher of the Physics Research Institute of Austria, X9 year's top 10 most influential individuals. Physics genius. He had already received the highest distinction from the physics world. And he was a senior researcher at 22. The netizens who saw his profile were shocked before exiting angrily. Had the world gone mad? Some of the netizens found the fan page of Celestial Wolf, too. Film God and Noah's accounts were found out. It had been a while since such juicy news appeared. It even involved Film God, Film Empress, Ava Hutchinson, and Toby Yearling. It shouldn't be surprising that Twitter's servers crashed. It was such big news after all. Some people were still unaware of Bessy. The previous incidents and photos were deleted by Michael after all, but people were all curious and couldn't help but ask. Who was this person? Why are so many people supporting her? Why is Northwestern University supporting her as well? Even Leonard was confused by all the information. Leonard and Cleo read through all the comments and profiles. Even though most of them were positive, they weren't necessarily connected. They could only confirm that Magic Lamp was from the Miller Corporation and was Film God's niece. It wasn't long before a netizen added the information that Bessy just updated. Leonard and Cleo clicked on the link immediately. The perfect passerby said, Bessy Miller, female, X9 years top scholar in the national final exams, Northwestern University's freshman queen, the current supervisor in Northwestern University's Physics Research Institute, champion of the 19th ICNE physics competition, improved the nation's physics research to top 10 in the world. VIP member of the Evanston Violin Association, Noah's preferred creator, Nico Soup, founding member of OST, BM highest-ranked player in the poker tournament, chief engineering officer, Poppy of the Miller Corporation, Magic Lamp, creator of Celestial Wolf. Feel free to add in. Episode 595. Her brand is destroyed. I'm not going to add on to this. Just a warning. Your account is going to get hacked. You even dared to include her name? Have you forgotten how she removed all the news about herself? The creator of this post must be inexperienced. Let us light some candles for him. Yes, we should do that. Magic Lamp was blowing up in the national comic scene. It was the first time that someone managed to source out all her information. People in the industry might not be interested, nor could they comprehend her artistic, academic, and IT achievements. But they would know about Nico, who composed for Noah, and BM, the founding member of OST. Furthermore, she was Film God's niece. Someone even exposed her as Northwestern University's school tyrant. The stories shocked all the netizens. Leonard and Cleo still couldn't believe what they read. However, before they could continue reading the comments, the post had disappeared. At the same time, the other netizens had created a new post. Huge news. In half an hour, Bessy had stirred up a tremendous storm on Twitter without doing anything. No wonder Noah behaved that way, Cleo said as she took a deep breath. She stared at Leonard's phone, so shocked that she couldn't continue her sentence. How old was Bessy anyway? She wasn't even 25. Her bunch of friends were as impressive as her.
That's why she wasn't afraid that her rights to the movie were contested,
Leonard said. The room was silent, but not in the same way as a couple of minutes ago. Leonard looked at Magic Lamp's profile picture, but didn't dare to click on her profile. The top scholar of the college entrance examination, genius physicist, IT talent. He could not understand why the netizens created such a fuss. Leonard's phone rang and he immediately looked at it. It was from the higher-ups of Pinnacle Studios. "Pick up," Cleo said, smiling. Oh, how the tides have changed. Over at Pinnacle Studios, the head of the Higgins family was almost 60, but he was healthy and was fishing in the countryside. While he was resting for the evening, he received a classified document and immediately rushed to Pinnacle Studios. Xavier was still cleaning up the headquarters. When he heard that the family head had requested a meeting with the higher-ups, it felt strange. But he stopped what he was doing. He was happy as he wanted to discuss the rights to Pinnacle Studios with his grandfather. The company's higher-ups were ready and waiting for the old man's arrival. Shane was there as well. Xavier smiled when he saw him. He then announced to everyone,
"I've settled everything with Theo about Pinnacle Studios."
"Big brother," Shane said as he looked up.
Shane, you're being too emotional. It was critical to work with the Miller family. How could you have chosen Magic Lamp? Both the netizens and the Miller family are enraged. Thank goodness that Xavier solved the issue for you. Else, our efforts to establish a working connection with the capital would have been wasted.
One of the higher-ups said,
"Let's remove Shane from the CEO position when the family head arrives."
Xavier smiled as he heard that. Everyone was talking to Xavier and Theo. Previously, the Higgins family didn't want to express their support openly. This was because Shane had achieved a remarkable feat by acquiring Pinnacle Studios. Hence, several higher-ups supported him. But who would have known that he'd ruin it? Now, only those closest to him would speak to him. Everyone else only talked to Xavier. Suddenly, the Higgins family head entered the room.
"Grandfather, chairman."
Everyone in the meeting room stood up. Theo dared to argue with Shane because he didn't have anyone to support him, but he respected the Higgins family head a lot. The old man nodded and disregarded Xavier, who was trying to speak to him. He then turned to Shane and said,
"Shane, why have you returned? Have you settled everything?"
Shane was surprised as well, but he immediately answered,
"Grandpa, regarding Magic Lamp, who was under Pinnacle Studios."
The old man answered,
"I am aware of everything. I have asked to cancel breaking the contract for your cousin. I understand that you are close to Magic Lamp. Please ask her to return to us. We'll have to rely on you to establish a connection between our family and the capital. It's not too late. Shane, go contact the Miller Corporation headquarters regarding the contract."
The old man said as he asked his subordinates to send Shane off. Everyone was shocked by the Higgins family's head's reaction after what had happened on the internet. After Shane left, Xavier burst out uncontrollably.
"What's the matter with you, Grandpa? This is our chance to gain contacts in Austria. The Marshall family has successfully contacted them."
The old man finally turned around after Shane was out of sight. He took a long look at the higher-ups of the Pinnacle Studios and then stared at Xavier. He then said,
"Why are you so dumb this time? Why are you breaking the contract with Magic Lamp? Grandpa, Shane has abused his authority regarding Magic Lamp's contract with us. The netizens scolded us, and the Miller Corporation didn't want to help. Are you even aware of the reason why the Miller Corporation was willing to cooperate with us?"
The old man slammed a pile of documents on the desk angrily.
"The Marshall family passed me this information just now. I've asked you to figure out the truth, and yet you canceled our contract with her. Do you have any idea who Magic Lamp is? Bessy Miller, the Miller Corporation's chief engineering officer, the oldest daughter of the Miller family. She was the one who initiated the contract. Or else, it wouldn't have happened in the first place. What's the point of trying to slander her? Have you lost your mind?"
Everyone knew that the Miller family was rising and threatening the Clark family. But few knew that the reason behind their rise was because of the eldest lady. Xavier was shocked by what the Higgins family had said. He stared at the stack of documents that the Higgins family had threw on the table. Magic Lamp. Bessy. He had investigated Magic Lamp's identity. He knew that her last name was Miller. But he never thought that she was from the Miller family. Who would have thought that the most low-profile writer in Pinnacle Studios was the oldest daughter of the Miller family? Xavier's mind went blank from shock. His grandfather left to look for Shane after venting his frustration. Now that the Marshall family had established connections with the capital, the Higgins family mustn't upset the Miller family. Shane played a fundamental role in this. Everyone in the office was just as shocked as Xavier. Everything was over. Shane would have a bigger say in the family's matters from now on. Everything was going to change in Devil City. As compared to them, Portia was the most affected one. As she constantly checked on Twitter, she was thrilled when she saw that the number of her followers was increasing. However, after the incident, her Twitter exploded. Someone from the Higgins Corporation exposed that she was the one that relied on the connections to get where she was today. She couldn't even hide the fact that she liked her own unofficial account. Hence, everyone was making fun of her. Especially when her fans insulted her by saying, "Didn't Magic Lamp know that Miss Yates has tens of millions of fans?" Because of her accomplishments and her relationship with Toby Yearling, Film God, and Noah, not even Film God could compare with her in terms of gaining fans. If you're thinking of making fun of Bessy for having a few fans, you must be crazy. Comments about Miss Yates increased by the second. She immediately posted an apology, but she could never erase the like she gave to the post, which hinted that Bessy had to do something humiliating so she could regain her popularity. Her personal branding of a beautiful comic artist was destroyed. Portia didn't know what to do. Then, she immediately remembered what Benson said to her. She wanted to gain the grandfather's favor today, so she stayed in the West family house. She went down to find Benson, knocked on his door, and asked, "Benson, what was the Miller family that you were talking about just now? Could you tell me more about it?" Episode 596. Wrong Address. Benson was shocked. Benson was an elderly man. It was already 11 p.m. and he was already asleep. He was completely unaware of what had happened online. When he heard what Portia said, he immediately woke up. It was the first time he saw Portia with that kind of expression. This meant that what Pete told him previously was real. But Benson didn't say who told him that. He just looked at Portia and said, "I got the information out of nowhere. Miss Portia, are you all right?" Portia took a long look at him before leaving. As he saw her leave, Benson stood at his door. He then asked someone to investigate the matter with a solemn expression. Both Devil City and the online community were in an uproar tonight, but none of it affected Bessy. It was only the next day, when she got woken up by Mary's video call, that she knew what happened. She talked on the phone while brushing her teeth. Then she said, If there's nothing else, I'll hang up. I need to brush my teeth. After she was done, she opened up Twitter. On Twitter, Leonard had sent her a string of ... She replied the same thing to him. She continued scrolling her phone as she strolled downstairs. She saw a huge amount of unread messages on Twitter. Pete had sent her a message, too. I will be heading to visit a few local universities with my mom today. Bessy took a second glance at the message as she recalled what Andrea said a couple of days ago. She then drank her milk while deep in thought. She sent Pete a sentence. He told her, Edward would like to have a meal with you. What do you know about the research institutes in Devil City? She asked, smilingly while looking at Michael. Andrea felt that something was amiss when she came to Devil City. Michael left a piece of bread by her side and said, I've asked Colton to help research local chemical and pharmaceutical research institutes. Even though Terry and the gang were almost in Devil City, the Marshall family had the longest history here. It would be a piece of cake for them to do it. It shouldn't take long. All right, Bessy replied as she bit the bread. As they were originally from here, they should have the best information. Pinnacle Studios. Someone on Twitter consolidated Bessy's fans list. Hundreds of thousands of people went to the Pinnacle Studios platform to read the comics and also looked at her fans' ranking as well. This caused their recent upgraded server to crash again. The staff had to ask for mercy from the netizens, but the netizens replied, Calm down. Twitter servers have crashed so many times. Have they complained? Ask God Miller to help with the upgrade. There's more to come. Let me help you with tagging @MagicLamp@BM. The staff was speechless. In Shane's office, he had extended the contract with Leonard's help. The contract this time wasn't formulated by Magic Lamp. It was done by the Miller Corporation. In the other office, the Higgins family head and the Higgins family higher-ups breathed a sigh of relief. Grandpa Higgins was about to leave after making sure that the Magic Lamp issue was solved. But the secretary entered the office, bringing someone along. Shane, Colton sent you an invitation. Shane was so shocked that he lost grip on his pen. He then asked, Colton Marshall? Colton was even more powerful than his grandpa. Such a powerful man in Devil City. Why would he send him an invitation? Even the Higgins family head was shocked. The Marshall family had managed to establish connections with the two continents. They were the most powerful family in Devil City. He asked, Julius? He knew Colton's most trusted employee, Julius. Julius left a gift as he looked at Shane. He then lamented about Shane's good fortune and said, Shane, Colton is sincere in inviting you. He passed the invitation to Shane and then left. In the office, everyone exchanged glances. After a while, Grandpa Higgins asked, Shane, how do you know Colton? Julius is one of his most trusted employees. Shane shook his head. He just stared at Julius as the latter departed, and fell into deep thought. After Grandpa Higgins left, Leonard looked at Shane and asked, Shane, regarding Julius just now. Shane looked at him and answered, I remember him. He was the delivery person who came on the 14th of June. Leonard was shocked. That was the day Magic Lamp extended the contract. He immediately sent her a message. Great God, how did your contact arrive? Magic Lamp replied in a couple of seconds. It wasn't by delivery. I've asked someone to send it to you. Shane saw the message as well. The two of them exchanged glances and could see the shock in each other's eyes. She was so powerful that she could get Colton's trusted employee to deliver it for her. After a while, Shane looked at Leonard and said, I would like to meet Magic Lamp, the great god. Can you help me arrange for it? Leonard replied, I'll ask. In the West family, Benson received information about what had happened between Portia and the Higgins family. Portia was a high-profile person, and everything that happened on Twitter could not be hidden. Not to mention that it was such tremendous news. There weren't many female celebrities in Devil City. This was especially because the Marshall family didn't have any females for this generation. Even though Portia was the first female celebrity in Devil City, she was nothing compared to Rosemary and Bessy from the capital. After he understood everything, Benson approached Edward and Project Director West to discuss what measures they should take. The group of people exchanged glances, seeing the shock on each other's faces. They were reminded of what Pete warned.
Sir, even the Higgins family was affected. The families in the capital are really powerful. Just that, how did Pete know that the Miller family was behind all of this?
Asked Project Director West. He felt lucky, as he wasn't part of the saga yesterday because of what Benson had said. Else, the Miller family would have included the West family in their revenge. Benson was worried the entire night as well. He asked,
"What about Miss Portia?"
No one answered him. They just exchanged glances. It was now impossible for Portia to continue her work in the comic industry, especially after offending Shane and the oldest daughter of the Miller family. Her status in Devil City was because of Shane. The Higgins family was nothing compared to the capital, but they were still the top family in Devil City. The West family couldn't be compared to them as well. They no longer had any advantage in the entire situation. Now that Pete had appeared in the scene, the West family was going to shift their focus. Edward shook his head. He had warned Portia already. Hence, this was her own wrongdoing. He sighed and said,
"Benson, have you asked Pete to invite them to the West family home for my birthday? Invite his cousin and mom as well. Wait, let's not ask him. Inviting his cousin directly would be better."
Pete was really stubborn at the moment. Convincing his cousin would be the easier way. Edward felt like he needed to thank his cousin, as he had benefited a lot from the medicine that he got from her and wanted to give her something in return.
"Oh,"
Benson replied with a nod. He understood that Andrea and Pete respected her cousin a lot.
"I'll ask Marvin. I'm not sure where she's staying."
It was an important matter. Benson wanted to invite her personally. As they spoke, someone left after standing outside the study room. At Portia's room, after she heard what her trusted subordinate reported, Portia said, "Pete, I knew it. He's up to no good." Alec had a strange look on his face as he held onto a cigarette. He spoke after a while.
"Portia, Pete is a threat. Edward is already siding with Pete while I'm still around. Does he have any regards for us?"
Portia didn't reply to him. It was over between Shane and her. Without the support from the Higgins family, she was doomed to suffer in the West family, especially since Alec told her that some were siding with Pete along with Edward's will. Portia lifted her head and said, "Dad, let's do it." Portia was ruthless. If she weren't, she wouldn't be where she was today. Benson contacted Marvin immediately. Marvin told him Bessy's address after seeking her permission. Benson was shocked by the address. It was a place for the rich and powerful. But when he considered the medicine that she gifted Edward, he wasn't surprised anymore. Edward was still unwell. Hence, he asked Benson to invite Pete's cousin. Benson dressed himself up and went to meet Bessy to pass her the invitation written by Edward. The chauffeur drove him to the place. When they reached and the chauffeur saw the huge building, he said,
"Pete's cousin has an impressive house."
Not everyone in the West family knew about Pete's cousin. Benson asked the chauffeur out of curiosity,
"How do you know?"
The chauffeur replied mysteriously,
"When Pete went to look for his cousin, military personnel were stationed around the place."
The chauffeur was referring to Daniel's place. It was only accessible to the powerful. Benson was shocked. He looked for Unit 1201. He then tidied himself up and rang the doorbell. The door opened immediately. However, the person who opened the door wasn't Marvin. It was another handsome face. Benson knew him. Taken aback, he panicked.
I'm so sorry, Shane. I must have gotten to the wrong place. I'm heading to the 12th floor.
Marvin popped his head from behind Shane and said,
"Benson, Why have you arrived so quickly? Come in.
Shane gave way to him and said,
Please come in.
Benson didn't move. Impressions. Episode 597, The Ransom, Invoking Michael's Wrath. A minute later, Benson entered. Beside him, Shane still greeted him politely, but Benson was too shocked to even dare to speak freely. He only greeted Shane cautiously. Needless to say, the Higgins and Marshall families of Devil City were too iconic. Although their reign hadn't been as long, their position in Devil City was equivalent to the 4 major families in Evanston. The West family's roots were shallow and couldn't be compared to the Higgins family, no matter which aspect it was. The West family only floated in the upper middle tier of Devil City and was incomparable to top giants like the Higgins family. The reason Portia had such a good reputation in Devil City and in the West family wasn't because she was a comics author, but also because she was familiar with Michael of the Higgins family. Thus, he had greeted Shane very politely upon seeing him at Bessy's place. Benson couldn't help but remember how on the first day he came to Devil City, Bessy had rejected his offer to send her off, saying that she had friends in Devil City. Could it have been Shane? Benson was still thinking about this when Marvin handed him a cup of tea.
Please sit down for a while. Madame is still talking to Mr. Marks.
Marvin handed 2 cups of tea to Benson and Shane respectively. Then picked up the phone that he had put down and continued playing his game. Mr. Marks? Neither Shane nor Benson had heard of Mr. Marks, and they followed Marvin's gaze to look at the balcony. Bessy had her back to them and was speaking on her cell phone, her expression and voice unclear. The 2 of them curbed their curiosity and sat down cautiously with their teacups. Benson didn't dare to sit next to Shane and settled down beside Marvin on the opposite side. Sitting near to Marvin, Shane chatted idly with him. He was good at socializing and also knew that people following Bessy weren't simple characters. Benson didn't attempt to join the conversation, but his eyes were attracted by the fancy game on Marvin's phone.
This game seems quite interesting. What game is it?
The game had a villain that crashed through barriers and slowly cultivated skills. This type of game was rather peculiar and really attracted Benson.
What is it called? I want to let my granddaughter play too.
Benson pushed up his reading glasses. Marvin shook his head and explained to him.
This is a game that Madame's younger brother designed. It won a special prize in the International Youth Group, but he didn't sell the copyright, so it's not available on the market. If you like it, you can add me on Twitter and I'll send it to you.
Holding his cell phone, Benson froze and was speechless. Shane didn't seem surprised and just laughed.
How old is Miss Miller's brother?
He asked curiously. Based on Bessy's superb IT performance, it was only normal for her brother to be able to develop games.
He's 12 this year,
Marvin said casually. Tucker had been studying abroad with Brandon and rarely returned to America in the past 2 years. Because he followed Bessy, Tucker had contacted him more often. However, he rarely contacted him recently, presumably because he was busy with Brandon's training. Marvin wasn't clear about the specific details. He was thinking about something when he was suddenly surprised to feel 2 pairs of eyes staring at him. Looking up, he saw that both Benson and Shane were staring at him.
What's the matter?
He scratched his head. Benson and Shane were both speechless. After a long while, Marvin realized in hindsight that they were probably marveling at Tucker's age. He added Benson on Twitter and sent him the game. Benson stayed at Bessy's place for nearly an hour and left after convincing her to go to the West family. On the way back, he sat in the car thinking about life, and he was so solemn that his chauffeur glanced at him curiously. When he returned home, he happened to bump into Portia, who was talking to Edward. After the incident about the convenient reading, Portia had become less arrogant than before and had contacted other people actively. After all, she was the screenwriter of The Realm of Gods and had enough authority for people to give her face.
"You'll have to apologize sincerely to Shane. He'll probably forgive you,"
Edward coughed and said solemnly to her.
"Businessmen always place their interests first. You should just lie low for now and wait for this wave to blow over. We still have the big pharmaceutical project in our hands. Even if we ignore the Higgins family, there'll still be others."
Shane doesn't want to see me right now. Portia sighed. She saw Benson out of the corner of her eye and asked, "Benson, where have you been?"
"He went to invite Pete's cousin to our house."
Edward also turned to him.
"Benson, has she agreed?"
Benson looked up at them.
"She—"
"Grandpa, I still have an appointment with Mr. White. You guys can talk first." Upon hearing them mention Pete and his cousin, Portia took her bag, nodded slightly towards Edward, and left. She was now busy repairing her relationship with the Higgins family and building connections like a spinning top. She really wasn't interested in Pete and his cousin. Benson naturally paused and stopped talking. Once Portia had left, he turned back to Edward.
"His cousin didn't agree?"
Edward looked at his expression and was worried.
"That's not it. She said she'll come."
Benson shook his head and looked quietly at Edward.
"I just wanted to say that I saw Shane at his cousin's place."
Upon hearing this, Edward choked on the warm water that he was drinking. Benson explained it from the beginning to end. Standing at the side, Project Director West was extremely surprised.
"I don't know who Pete's cousin is, but didn't Miss Portia want to contact Shane?" "Enough!"
Edward shook his head and put down the cup on the table.
"Let's stop discussing Pete's cousin."
He wanted to repair his relationship with Pete, not make him and his cousin feel like the West family was trying to take advantage of them. Benson and Project Director West both knew what Edward was thinking. They exchanged glances and both remained silent. 2 more days passed. This year, Edward didn't hold a big birthday celebration. He didn't make a big deal of his birthday and only planned to bring a few close people to the West family's house. At 8 a.m., all the West family juniors had come to brush up on their favorable impressions. Even Portia and Alec, who had always been busy, didn't go out. Edward got dressed and received a wave of blessings from the younger staff members. Then, he sat down in the garden downstairs and asked the butler,
"Why hasn't Pete come yet?"
Standing beside him and making ginseng tea, Benson said,
"Pete seems to be rather busy these days. I haven't received any news from his cousin either."
Edward sighed.
"I don't know what this kid is busy with."
While the two were discussing, Benson's cell phone rang. He looked down to see an unfamiliar number and then picked up. He stayed silent and listened to the other end of the phone. Bam! Benson's cup fell directly to the ground, and his expression changed drastically. His body became unstable, and he almost fell over.
"What? What's the matter?"
Edward had an awful premonition inside. Trembling, Benson could hardly hold the phone still. He supported himself with one hand on the chair and looked at Edward in shock.
Pete?
He was too terrified to speak properly.
"What happened to Pete?"
The old man's heart was twisting into a ball of worry. Benson's complexion paled.
"Pete and the others have been kidnapped. I just received a phone call from the kidnappers. They demand $25 million for their safe return."
$25 million wasn't difficult for the West family, but it was indeed difficult to come out with $25 million in cash. However, Edward would pay no matter what. His heart burning in anxiety, Edward covered his mouth with a handkerchief and coughed several times. He thought about what happened to his most outstanding son, Alan, 10 years ago, and said anxiously,
"Go, get ready, find a bank."
Finding cash was difficult, but it wasn't difficult to obtain a bank loan. Edward had a lot of private properties under his name, which could be used to mortgage $25 million. In order to collect the ransom as quickly as possible, he even opened his safe and contacted the bank. As for the police, Edward didn't dare to gamble on Alan's only offspring and didn't even dare to mention it to too many people. The money raised was quickly transferred over. An hour later, Benson received a message on his cell phone with the address of an abandoned construction site. Since the summit was still going on, there was a traffic jam in Devil City. When Edward, Benson, and a few people hurried over, it was already 2 hours later, at midnight. Only Pete was there. Andrea was nowhere in sight. Pete didn't look good, and he was leaning against the wall with a USB in his hand, his expression unclear. He was wearing a black shirt and had blood running down his fingertips. The moment he saw him, the body that Edward had been supporting all the way here finally collapsed, and he fell straight down. Pete was also barely holding on. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and handed the USB to Benson.
"Hand this over to the police station, and my mom. Find my brother-in-law."
He barely finished the sentence before falling to the ground. The West family was in complete turmoil.
"Hospital."
Benson supported them both.
"Send Edward and Pete to the hospital."
In the hospital, Benson paced back and forth in front of the emergency room, where Pete and Edward were inside. To his side, Alec hurried over from home with a look of urgency and no signs of strangeness on his face.
"Benson, what happened to Dad? Why is he in the hospital? Is he all right?"
Benson looked down at his phone and said roughly,
"Pete was kidnapped, and his mother is still missing. You didn't inform the police?"
Alec's eyes flickered. Benson didn't notice his expression and just slid down the wall onto the ground.
"No, we can't call the police. We just transferred $25 million.
The West family was well connected and wasn't considered weak in Devil City, but they hadn't found any news of the kidnappers. He had contacted people he knew, but couldn't even find the surveillance cameras. In such circumstances, it could only mean that the kidnappers had someone supporting them. Benson really didn't dare to call the police for fear that the kidnappers would really murder them in anger. Benson's mind was now in a jumble. He quickly thought of Pete's words and hastily took out his mobile phone to call his cousin. He was about to make a call when his phone rang. It was Bessy's attendant, Marvin. He directly picked up.
"Benson."
It was Marvin's voice on the other end.
"Where are you all? The maid said that you're not at home."
Just as Benson was about to speak, the emergency door opened. A nurse came out from inside, pulled off her mask, and said solemnly, "My apologies. The patient has taken a turn for the worse. His cells are inactive and we can't figure out the cause behind it. We'll arrange for an ambulance to send him to Evanston. There might be a solution there. Please, make a decision as soon as possible." The nurse's voice wasn't low, and Marvin heard it on the phone. He leaned against the car door and looked at the West family's villa.
"Benson, whose cells are inactivated?"
he asked solemnly. The University Hospital Center, an affiliate of the school Pete visited, didn't dare to take Pete in as a patient. Benson almost fainted. The University Hospital Center was the best hospital in Devil City, and if even they didn't dare to accept him, his blood ran cold, and he stuttered.
"We're in Beacon Memorial Hospital. Pete was..."
Marvin's expression changed drastically, and his brain buzzed noisily. Standing up abruptly, He first glanced at Bessy sitting in the car. She had her eyes closed and was leaning against the door of the car. Marvin couldn't help but lower his voice and say solemnly,
"Benson, call the doctor."
Perhaps Marvin's aura was too strong, but Benson subconsciously handed the phone to the nurse. As soon as the nurse reported the case, she heard a male voice say,
"Send me the report."
Stunned, she quickly sent him the report. At the same time, on the last day of the summit in Devil City, Michael was communicating with a group of people when his cell phone rang. He looked down to read the message, and his face suddenly changed color.
"Sorry, I have matters to attend to."
He excused himself and left directly. After going out, he drove directly to the hospital. He put on his Bluetooth headset and dialed Terry, his voice terrifyingly calm.
"Where are you?"
Episode 598, 10th on the most wanted list.
"Did something happen?"
Colton was still entertaining the guests. After Julius sent off Michael, he stood next to Master Marshall and lowered his voice.
"I seemed to hear that Michael is looking for that Terry."
Terry was here to discuss the direction of cooperation. The Marshall family had heard of the Clark family before, but didn't know what business they were involved in. Recently, after being in contact with Kenneth and Marvin, they discovered that the Clark family's influence wasn't as simple as just international, especially Terry, who was more familiar with Kenneth. Colton was surprised at the mention of Terry. He smiled and talked to the international business partners about the economic lifeline, before turning his head slightly and lowering his voice as well.
"Go check it out and contact Terry." "Yes."
Julius nodded. He had the same idea, too. After learning about the tip of Michael's iceberg, everyone in the Marshall family realized that he was no less threatening than Kenneth in Devil City. Outside, Michael rushed to the hospital. His phone was leaning on the steering wheel and Daniel was on the call with him. His voice sounded a little broken and rough at the moment.
"Tell me again, whose report is this?" "Pete."
Michael was driving very quickly.
"Fuck, her family is seriously impressive."
Daniel took his car key and walked to the garage. He paused for a long while before saying,
"Can't they come out with a more normal person?"
He knew that Bessy was a lunatic, and Tucker wasn't very normal either. Although Pete had been taciturn, Daniel always felt like this school tyrant was much more normal than Bessy and Tucker. But seeing this, he had underestimated him. They were all fierce and willing to lay their lives down. Michael didn't reply. In the hospital, several other principals of the West family were also present. After all, this incident involved Edward. The police were taking notes with Benson.
"We have yet to find any news about the abandoned factory. I'm asking the technicians to check the number. Don't worry, we'll find them as soon as possible. You should keep in touch with us at all times."
He took the USB that Benson handed him and handed it directly to the police officer. He said solemnly,
"Let the technician check it out as soon as possible."
His hands were still trembling. Alec walked over and asked the police officer a few things before looking at Benson.
"Benson, aren't you going to transfer Pete to Evanston? Let's go down and go through the formalities. The inpatient department in Evanston is always crowded, so it might not be easy to arrange so temporarily."
Project Director West also lowered his voice and looked extremely anxious.
"What do I need to do?" "Yes, the formalities."
Benson turned around with trembling hands and looked for the nurse. She was nowhere to be seen, and the door of the emergency room was still closed. The key thing was, would Evanston's hospital accept Pete? Benson took a deep breath. After all, he had been in charge of the West family for decades, so he had to arrange everything at this time. He walked directly to the elevator and went downstairs to the front desk to ask about Pete's transfer. Project Director West followed him, while Alec stood there with narrowed eyes. He watched them for a while before following along. Downstairs, Benson found the person in charge of the matter and checked the records with the nurse. After confirming that Pete's body functions had declined for no reason, the hospital contacted Evanston's side, and they also moved quickly. The internal medicine expert had already read the content of the disease and had already sent a report back. The hospital at Evanston has no way either. The nurse had received a reply on the computer. She looked at Pete's age, then at Benson's expression, and couldn't bear it much. Benson's mind completely exploded. Project Director West had to support him in the emergency room. Outside, Portia had also arrived. Alec explained to her about the transfer to Evanston's hospital. After listening to the incident, Portia paused upon seeing Benson's expression and finally said, "Benson, we have to give it a shot. I'll contact Director Ross for you." She took out her cell phone to contact Director Ross. The phone had yet to go through when the elevator door not far away opened. There were several doctors and nurses in white coats standing inside, and Director Ross, whom Portia wanted to contact, was at the very front. They all came out of the elevator and moved quickly over, walking with the wind behind them. At the same time, the door of the emergency room opened, and two doctors and nurses pushed Pete out. Director Ross glanced at Pete's IV drip and waved his hand.
"Push him to the top floor. A helicopter has been arranged. Open the life channel."
The doctor and nurses moved swiftly. The West family had yet to react when Pete was pushed to the elevator entrance. Several doctors were even discussing Pete's case along the way. These doctors looked rather old. Their professions could be seen from the name badge hanging on their chests. Head Doctor of Infectious Diseases, Head Doctor of Cardiology, Head Doctor of Hematology. Today was a day off, but except for Director Ross, all the head doctors had also arrived. Apart from meetings held in the hospital, the other nurses and doctors rarely saw so many well-known head doctors at the same time. Not to mention how they set up a small team in such a short time. Alec's mouth hung open, and he turned to Benson.
"Benson, what's going on? What life channel? Didn't they say that Evanston's hospital can't help either?"
Benson was too weak and stunned at this moment.
"Benson, don't worry. The life channel has already been opened."
Director Ross put down Pete's report indicators and looked at Benson.
"With Mr. Brown around, Pete will be fine."
Then he followed the hospital bed into the elevator. The elevator was full, so the head doctors stayed behind. Several of the West family members exchanged glances.
"Mr. Brown?" "Mr. Brown is a member of the World Health Organization."
The remaining doctors looked at Benson and explained very politely. Their voices were even a little excited.
"Do you remember the virus in Evanston last time? The two top doctors of Evanston's Medical College researched the resistance drugs and shook the entire medical community with the results. Dr. Brown is the Austrian Medical Organization's mascot. The nobles of other countries have invited him several times, but to no avail. You're all really amazing to have invited him."
He was over 100 years old, but he was still such a junior fan of Dr. Brown. The West family might not know Dr. Brown, but when it came to the Austrian Medical Organization, it was like thunder piercing the ear. Not to mention the West family. Even the Marshall family hadn't been able to connect with Austria's economic lifeline. Looking at the doctors who had just left, Alec's expression changed several times before he turned to look at Benson. Benson's depressed aura finally faintly dissipated. Although Pete still had Director Ross and people from the medical organization on his side, Benson was still worried. As for the organization, he didn't think too much about it, because there was another important thing now. There was no news of Andrea. Edward's condition had improved, but he was still unconscious. Pete was with Director Ross. Benson was now anxious about Andrea. He went directly to the police station, and Alec and the others all followed him after exchanging glances. The police station was in a state of rush. The door of the office was tightly closed. A police officer printed out a document and said seriously to the West family, "The prisoner is very cunning. We checked the phone number's location, and it located us on the satellite. They obviously have a master hacker on their side. We've also seen Pete's USB, and there's a string of them. The virus code is still being solved by the technical staff. According to the information we've received, the criminal is a man on the international wanted list. Everything points to a disaster. You'll have to be prepared." "A person on the international wanted list?" Benson's face paled. "Are you certain?" "According to the records we found based on the marks left by the USB, he's the 10th most wanted criminal on Interpol Matthews' list." The officer nodded and explained. It was also the first time he was handling such a tricky case. "At present, we don't have time to contact the international side, but the longer we wait, the less likely the kidnapped victim will be alive. They might be on the plane going abroad right as we speak. We'll contact the Evanston branch of the CIA. They have many cases of contact with foreign countries." Upon hearing this, Portia and Alec exchanged horrified glances. "Then, what can we do?" Benson supported himself on the armrest. "Please be sure to rescue Miss Andrea. It's not impossible." The police officer also felt distressed upon seeing how worried and sick Benson was. He had also just heard of Pete's news from the hospital just now. "If you can find Morningbird from 129, Miss Watson's location will be quickly identified." The Morningbird? Benson had heard of 129 before, but didn't know Morningbird. "How do I contact him? It doesn't matter how much money it costs." Benson was ignorant, but Alec knew clearly. He raised his head and looked at Benson. "The 5 veterans from 129 are very difficult to hire. You have no idea how many people are looking for them every day, trying to hire them. It's as difficult as to climb up to the sky." "Morningbird?" While Alec was talking, a voice rang out not far away. It was a very clear voice with a slightly chilly tone to it. "What do you need her for?" The group of people turned around to look at the source of the voice. It was a girl wearing a white t-shirt, one hand on her belly, the other holding a cell phone. Her complexion was a little abnormally white at the moment. Behind her was a tall man. It was Bessy and Marvin. This was the first time Portia ever saw Bessy. She looked at Bessy's face and her eyes narrowed slightly, as if she thought of something. "Miss Miller?" Benson recognized her and immediately stood up. Without even looking at him, Bessy directly turned to the police officer. She put her hands on the table in front of her, bent down slightly, and asked again, "What do you need Morningbird for?" The police officer was stunned. Bessy was too impatient. She took out her phone. "Huh?" Taken aback, the police officer quickly returned to his senses and cautiously replied, "The kidnapper is on the wanted list. 129's Morningbird caught a wanted criminal single-handedly last time. She's definitely better than anyone in this aspect." Bessy pursed her lips. She had yet to receive any specific news and only knew that this person was on the wanted list after hearing it from the police officer. Clarissa was indeed very good at this kind of thing. Bessy nodded, directly dialed Clarissa's number and said concisely, "The 10th most wanted criminal on the list. Do you have news about him?" "What's wrong?" On the other end, Clarissa was very surprised.
Are you out of seclusion?
"No. He has kidnapped my aunt," Bessy said lightly. "Give me the information." Clarissa was shocked and senseless upon hearing this. She looked down at her phone and narrowed her eyes. This man must be crazy. He dared to kidnap your aunt? Was he sick of living? "I have to leave today. Scratching her head, she patted the shoulder of the person in front of her and took a leave of absence at will. Then she picked up her camera to find Jared.
Ugh.
The man stared at her.
The editor-in-chief will fire you if you keep asking for leave.
Clarissa waved her hand casually. Give me what Pete left you. Bessy hung up and walked directly to Benson opposite. Her eyes were extremely dark, and her fingernails were deeply embedded in her palms. Benson returned to his senses.
He left a USB. I gave it to them. There's a phone number on the kidnapper's side, but Officer Allen only found out the satellite positioning.
Give me the kidnapper's phone number. Bessy nodded with a calm expression.
Miss, we've checked the cell phone number already. It's useless,
said the police officer beside him. Give it. Bessy glared at him. Benson subconsciously took out his phone and clicked on the number. Marvin had already pulled a chair for Bessy to sit on. At this moment, countless messages and calls were bombarding his phone. They probably knew that Bessy was in a bad mood and didn't dare to provoke her. Bessy sat down while flipping her phone into a mini computer. She placed the blue projection keyboard neatly on the desk. She opened the editor, called up a search order, and tried to locate the number.
It's useless.
Opposite her, the police officer was first shocked by her equipment, but then tried to dissuade her. Bessy pressed the enter button. On the screen of the mobile phone, several red road tracks appeared on the three-dimensional map of the city. The onlookers immediately shut their mouths. The tracks finally stopped at the airport. Bessy put one hand on the table and the other on her abdomen, then glanced at Marvin. Is Terry at the airport? Glancing at his phone, Marvin reported the news to her.
He and Mr. Ken have blocked the defense line of the two airports. Colton is coming out now, and Miss Hale has just sent a document. As well, Mr. Matthew told you to hand the man directly to him after capturing him.
Episode 599. The Dust Settles. Bessy read the transport track on her phone and directly sent it to Terry. Actually, Marvin had no intention of telling her about Pete's affairs. Not only were Michael and Terry both here, but this was also the Marshall family's land. Nothing would happen to the pair of mother and son, and if anything did happen to them, then Terry might as well be useless. However, given Marvin's IQ, it was almost impossible to hide it from Bessy. Have you unlocked the USB? Bessy understood Pete and knew that he would dare to take such a risk. He must have his own thinking and must have left enough evidence behind. The characters that Bessy mentioned to Marvin shocked Officer Allen and everyone present. They could ignore Morningbird and the others, and they didn't know Mr. Ken. But the two airports had been sealed off, and everyone knew the patriarch of the Marshall family in Devil City. Not to mention Officer Allen. Even Alec couldn't help but look in Bessy and Marvin's direction.
Not yet. I'll bring it over.
From Bessy's moves just now, Officer Allen already knew that her computing skills were nothing to laugh at. Since they couldn't unlock the USB, they might as well give it to her. As soon as she took over the USB, there was another noise at the door, coupled with the indistinct noises of a group of people. Frowning, Officer Allen was about to head outside to see what was going on when he saw the chief coming out of the office and walking respectfully towards the door. At the door, a few tall figures entered. The chief hurriedly greeted the person standing in front and respectfully bowed.
Mr. Marshall.
The noisy police station suddenly became dead silent. Colton had always been serious and calm, and his expression was now sharp and cold. He nodded slightly towards the chief, then walked directly in the crowd's direction, and stopped in front of Bessy. He bowed and sincerely apologized.
Miss Miller, please go to the airport first. Terry has news. I apologize about Miss Watson.
The crowd parted spontaneously for him to walk through.
Okay.
Holding the USB in her hand, Bessy stepped forward, her expression still cold.
Let's talk as we walk.
When they walked out together, everyone could clearly see that the extremely powerful patriarch of the Marshall family was walking one step behind Bessy. In the entire room, no one dared to utter a single word. When the two of them had disappeared, most people heaved a sigh of relief and then exchanged glances.
Even Mr. Marshall came.
Someone asked Benson who on earth Bessy was. Alec was even more shocked. For some reason, his heart was shaking tremendously. He raised his head to look at Benson and opened his mouth, his hands trembling on both sides.
Benson, that was Pete's cousin.
Benson knew what he wanted to ask and answered directly. In fact, he was still in a daze as well as he stared in Bessy's direction. He had already faintly guessed that Pete's cousin wasn't an average girl. After all, the experimental drug incident back then. Especially the last time when he saw Shane at Bessy's house. But he never expected that even Colton would have such a respectful attitude towards her. Pete's cousin? Since when did Pete have such a powerful cousin? Portia and Alec exchanged glances, both of them a little horrified and shocked. Marvin had already left behind Bessy, fulfilling his mission of following after her. However, Julius hadn't left with Colton and stayed at the police station.
Mr. Marshall.
The chief also knew him and directly asked.
Officer Allen just found out that the man was last seen at the airport.
Julius shook his head.
Don't move your men. I'll notify you if anything happens.
He gave a few orders and then left in a hurry. The chief swept his gaze around the crowd and finally rested his eyes on the West family. He paused for a moment and then said very politely,
Mr. West, shall we take you to the hospital?
In the hospital, having used the experimental drugs for a period of time before and coupled with his affection for Pete, Edward woke up after the doctor's rescue and directly asked for news of Pete and Andrea. Upon hearing that the criminal was at the airport, he got up from the hospital bed and wanted to head over. Benson and Project Director West didn't stop him and went with him instead.
Pete has gone to Evanston. Don't worry. I heard from Director Ross that the World Health Organization performed the operation themselves, so there's nothing to worry about.
Benson comforted him. The World Health Organization? Although puzzled, Edward was bent on finding Pete and Andrea and didn't think too much about it. They bumped into the chief downstairs.
Oh, Edward, hello. Are you going to the airport now? It's not easy to get there now. How about we bring you?
The chief hurried forward and greeted him politely and respectfully. The West family had never had much contact with the Bureau before. Upon seeing how polite the chief was to him, Edward glanced at Benson in surprise. Benson explained in a low voice.
It's because of Pete's cousin.
Edward was stunned for a moment. Then he realized that the chief was being respectful to him because of Bessy. He had already been suspicious of Pete's cousin's identity, but it was obviously not the time to investigate about it now. They rushed to the airport. It was the last day of the summit, so the management shouldn't be as strict as before. However, the strange thing was that close to the airport, almost every road was under strict inspection. 2 main roads had even been sealed off. At this time, Edward and the others finally understood what the chief meant by, "It's not easy to get there now." With the chief, they traveled through the traffic jam smoothly, and it didn't take long before they reached the airport. The chief contacted Julius and stopped at the entrance. Julius called the chief again. After hanging up, the chief was stunned for a moment. before he took another look at Portia and Alec. This look frightened them both. "Dad, that international criminal," Portia asked Alec in a whisper after they entered. Alec hesitated even more.
"I don't know. I contacted them just now. Don't worry, they won't connect it to us. It's just that Pete's cousin."
He regretted not looking into Pete's cousin when Benson had mentioned her twice last time. Portia remained silent. In Evanston, Clarissa had a lot of information and news, especially the people she paid attention to on the international wanted list. The orders she took were mainly to arrest people. Jared hurried up from downstairs and looked slightly worried.
"How is it? Have you caught him? Is Lone Wolf okay? Did she flare up?"
"I've caught the guy." Clarissa leaned back in her chair and placed her camera on the table. She took a can of beer and opened the tab with one hand. "Michael, Lone Wolf, Kenneth, me, and even Devil City itself are involved. If we can't even catch the 10th most wanted criminal, we might as well resign." "It would be embarrassing." Clarissa nodded.
"That's good."
Jared sighed in relief, but his expression was still tense.
"My godson and goddaughter still haven't been born, but they're already experiencing such thrilling things."
He took out his phone and wanted to remind Michael to have better control of Bessy. This couldn't go on like this. He was thinking of this when he saw a bunch of messages on his communicator, all of them from the international community. The 4 people, Bessy, Michael, Clarissa, and Kenneth, were each a headache for the international community. It was even worse now that the 4 of them had joined hands. Their movements were so loud that even the international community had been alerted, asking if something serious had happened. Jared had to clean up their mess. 2 days later, 2 major events happened in Devil City. First, Xavier lost his power, and Shane became the first successor. Second, Alec, the first heir of the West family, was arrested on suspicion of the murder of his brother Alan of the West family 20 years ago. Portia was also arrested on suspicion of an attempted blackmail murder. In the prison, they were both interrogated together. Looking tired and weary, Alec glanced blankly at Portia.
"Where's Theo? Beg him to help us."
"I know." Portia had already requested a phone call to find a lawyer. She remembered Theo's phone number and directly called him. In the Marshall family's house, Theo had been detained by Colton for a few days now and had only been released after being taught a lesson for a week. He had been trapped in a small, dark room without a cell phone and hadn't even seen the sun for a week. For him, it was tantamount to a year. The first thing he did when he came out was look up the news of Pinnacle Studios, Magic Lamp, and Portia. These things popped up easily on Twitter. The entire comic world was focused on Magic Lamp, but he couldn't even find a single piece of news on Portia. Magic Lamp was still so popular despite that hideous picture? He called his assistant and asked about Portia. While asking, he went to Colton to confess his crimes. As soon as he walked to the study room, Julius stopped him and said that Colton was entertaining important guests. Theo waited not far away, and within 5 minutes, he saw Colton personally send the 2 out. He was respectful and polite. Theo had never seen him act in this way, and his eyes almost bulged out of their sockets. The 2 people beside Colton finally revealed their faces. It was a man and a woman. The man was tall and lean, like a bright moon. Although the woman looked cold, her face was exquisite and beautiful, especially since she carried an acute spirit and carefreeness that was very dazzling. Their momentums weren't inferior to Colton's, and were even faintly superior. Theo stared blankly at them, and was in a daze for a long time. Colton personally sent them out. After waiting for the 2 to leave, Theo asked Julius.
Who was that girl just now? Why haven't I seen her in Devil City?
You mean Miss Miller? Julius looked faintly at him.
You should know her. She's an author at Pinnacle Studios. I think her name was Magic something.
Episode 600, The Adventures of Clarissa. At 8:30 a.m. in Evanston, carrying her camera in one hand, Clarissa made a phone call with the other. Passing by the time card machine by the elevator, she held her card in her mouth and clocked in at the last minute.
Clarissa, you arrived just in time again.
An employee who just came down from the elevator saw her clocking in desperately and reached out in an interview gesture.
Let me interview you, ma'am. How do you manage to clock in exactly at the last minute every day?
It was okay if it was just 1 or 2 days. However, the time control she possessed to do it every single day was simply terrifying. Clarissa spit out the card in her mouth and said with a gentle expression, "It's nothing much. I have yet to become a master." Speaking of clocking in on time, Clarissa glanced at the time by the punch card machine. She secretly thought that if it was Lone Wolf, she would clock in every day at the last second. In terms of controlling time, she was still a junior. Clarissa walked into the elevator and reached out to press the floor button. "Don't worry about Matthew and the others. Jared has already helped you finish it." It was Bessy on the other end of the phone.
I'll hand the guy to Matthew.
"Hey, you better watch yourself." Clarissa counted the elevator floor and said, "Be nicer to my nephew or niece." So many people had their eyes on the child in her stomach. So how did she still have so much energy to be bouncing around all day long? She heard that Michael had even customized a full set of lab clothes for her in order to let her play on the computer.
Okay,
Bessy responded. When she arrived at her floor, Clarissa walked over to her workbench and said, "Okay, I'm at work. Let's talk later. By the way, remember to pass me the information I wanted. I'll go to Austria to deal with it in 2 days." She hung up and placed her camera on her desk. "Clarissa, why do you carry your camera wherever you go?" A round-faced girl leaned over from the next door and asked curiously, "Isn't it heavy?" The round-faced girl was Raven Allen, a travel reporter who had the best relationship with Clarissa in the news agency. As a rookie, she had followed Clarissa. Now that 2 years had passed, she was an official reporter and could act on her own. "What do you know?" Clarissa took a piece of paper and wiped her camera slowly. "This is the guy who provides for me." She patted her camera and smiled. Blushing, Raven lowered her voice and asked, "Clarissa, the director asked you to film a movie last time, right? Are you really not intending to go?" Clarissa's appearance was petite and delicate. She had beautiful features, fair skin, and was full of charm. However, she always wore glasses and makeup that Raven found unsuitable, so her aura and appearance had already been ruined. She had been discovered by the director right after she took a shower at Raven's house, ate at the food stall with her downstairs, and then walked by him without any makeup. Raven always felt like Clarissa with makeup was as sweet-tempered as a pretty daughter in a humble family. But without makeup, she was full of vigor and could stir up people's hearts. They were all like her, but also not like her. Nope. Clarissa wiped her camera and then started browsing through her work and sorting out the news. "Can you be a little more ambitious?" Raven glanced at her. "Can't you just get rid of your crazy makeup?" Raven felt like Clarissa had a pair of magical hands. When she helped her put on makeup, the result was astonishing. Why was it so hard to put on makeup for herself? "The news we have to run is Nate Clark. Grandma White's dog is missing." Clarissa read out her press release script. Raven was speechless. Sighing, she turned around and also started working. As soon as she turned on the computer, a news item popped up in the lower right corner. Popular actress Olivia Song entered and exited the hotel with a mysterious man last night. A picture was also attached. Olivia had become popular after acting in a popular drama previously. Recently, she starred as the second female lead in The Realm of Gods. Because of her scenes with Zeke, she had been in the limelight for a while. Their news agency was involved in people's livelihood as well as the entertainment industry. Raven wasn't really interested in this piece of news. Just as she was about to cross out the news, she glanced at the side profile of the man with Olivia. Wearing a black suit, the man was tall and slender. He had one hand in his pocket and looked very cold. Staring in disbelief, Raven enlarged the picture. When the picture became clearer, she frowned. She wanted to cross it out when she noticed that Clarissa was standing next to her, watching it with gusto while holding a white porcelain cup. Clarissa finally commented, "Not bad." "Clarissa, aren't you in the least bit angry?" Raven whispered. The man in the picture was Louis Fay. The Fay family wasn't ranked in the top 10 in Evanston, but they still had a lot of background. The last time Evanston stood in line, the Fay family had taken the wrong position in the early stages. But Louis had quickly found the right line and had barely just gained a foothold. In the outside world, he was a solo bachelor. In the circle, he was a diamond. Because he was engaged in the entertainment industry, such scandals weren't common. After all, he was only playing around. And it was no secret that he liked Sherry. Since this matter today was a big deal, Louis was quickly picked up. The Fay family didn't release any clarifications. "I'm not angry," Clarissa said lightly and casually. She had already settled her divorce agreement with Mr. Barnes. She took the mug to the pantry to pour coffee. Staring at her back, Raven couldn't help but sigh. She looked at the picture on the screen again and cursed Louis 100 times in her heart. After pouring a cup of coffee for herself, Clarissa didn't return to her seat. Instead, she quietly went to the boss's office upstairs. "Give me an assignment." She sat casually across from the boss. The boss shook his hand and almost failed to sign his name. "Where is it this time? I declare in advance that you're not allowed to go to the battlefield." "That's not necessary. There won't be a war there. This time, it's Austria." Clarissa lowered her head and took a sip of coffee. "For a week." "Austria?" The boss massaged his temple. "What the hell would you do there?" Despite saying so, he still arranged an assignment for her. "You've been working here for so many years. Have you ever thought of being promoted to deputy editor?" "Thank you, President Soup." She stood up and thanked him, directly interrupting the boss who was trying to give her a promotion. She turned and left the office. In the office, the boss stared at her back and shook his head involuntarily. Reaching out, he dialed a phone call. "Miss Fay. Yes, she's going away again. This time it's Austria for a week. Louis has really hurt her this time. He has been messing around. And news about him staying in a hotel has even been exposed. Otherwise, she wouldn't go out again just a few days after returning." It was 5:30 in the afternoon. Clarissa came back after running the news. She knocked off work with Raven. Since Clarissa didn't own a car, she usually went out in the agency's car. Today, she left with Raven. When they went downstairs, a BMW was parked on the opposite side of the road. Beside the BMW stood a young woman with a bag, the delicate makeup on her face making her aura even more obvious. When she saw Clarissa, she hurriedly walked over in her high heels. "Clarissa, wait." "Clarissa, is she your friend?" Raven had been with Clarissa for 2 years and had never seen her friends before. This was the first time, so she was a little surprised. "Yeah, Raven, you go on first." Clarissa squinted. Raven nodded and didn't ask who the young woman was. She took her bag and directly left. Clarissa. The young woman looked at Clarissa and sighed, carrying her precious branded bag. I only returned to America today and heard about Louis. Why is the Fay family like this? They won't even arrange a chauffeur for you. Forget it. Where are you going? I'll take you there. We'll talk as we go. To the Fay family's old house. Clarissa glanced at her and didn't refuse. In the afternoon, Mrs. Fay had called to ask her to return to the Fay family's house, and she couldn't refuse. The young woman was surprised to hear this, but she still got into the car and drove into the crowd. During rush hour, the traffic was very congested, and they drove only 1 kilometer in 10 minutes. At the red light again, the young woman put her hands on the steering wheel and glanced at Clarissa in the back seat. After a long time, she couldn't help but say, "Clarissa, don't blame our family. The situation back then." This young woman was Ashley Wright, Clarissa's childhood friend. The Hale family had lived right next to the Wright family, so Clarissa and Ashley's older brother Wesley had been childhood sweethearts. They both had the intention of getting married. You know, when news of your grandfather being comrades in battle with our grandfather broke out, Mrs. Fay proposed marriage to your family. Since your sister was unwilling, they chose you instead. The Fay family isn't easy to provoke, so my parents... Ashley pursed her lips. Clarissa clicked on Bessy's email in the back seat. Although Ashley didn't continue, Clarissa knew what she was saying. The Fay family wasn't considered the top family in Evanston, but it was still influential and wasn't an ordinary family. The Wright family was scholarly, and Wesley had also been the top student at the University of Chicago that year. His future had been boundless. Without even fighting with the Fay family, the Wright family had forced Ashley and Wesley abroad. The Wright family was actually not so weak, but neither of the parents intended to oppose the Fay family. Besides the distinguished career of the Fay family making it worthless to form an enemy of them. Even if the Wright family really wanted to fight with them, it would definitely not be over a woman like Clarissa.